Your daughter for your debt. Sign here." The paper hit the table like a death sentence. Evelyn Mercer stood frozen in the doorway of her father's study, watching him reach for the pen without hesitation. 22 years old, and she was about to become payment for cards he couldn't win and whiskey he couldn't refuse. The stranger across the desk didn't look like a monster, broad shoulders, quiet eyes, expensive boots, but that meant nothing. Pretty cages were still cages. Before we dive into Evelyn's story, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The morning started wrong. Evelyn knew it the moment she woke to silence instead of her stepmother's usual banging on the bedroom door. The house felt too still, like the air before a tornado touches down. She dressed quickly in the near dark, her fingers clumsy on the buttons of her worn calico dress, and made her way downstairs. Her father's study door was closed. Voices murmured behind it, low, male, unfamiliar. "Evelyn?" Her stepmother's voice cut through the hallway. Margaret Mercer stood at the base of the stairs, arms folded, face blank as a winter field. "Come here." "What's happening?" "Your father needs you." Something in Margaret's tone made Evelyn's stomach drop. She'd lived in this house long enough to recognize the specific quality of her stepmother's cruelty, the kind that came wrapped in calm, reasonable words. The study door opened before Evelyn reached it. Her father stood there, gray-faced and hollow-eyed, looking 10 years older than he had yesterday. Behind him sat a man Evelyn had never seen before. Tall, maybe 30 or a little older, dark hair, serious expression, clothes that said money without shouting it. He didn't look at her immediately, just kept his attention on some papers spread across her father's desk. "Evelyn," her father said. His voice came out hoarse. "Sit down." "I'll stand." "Sit down, girl." That was Margaret, already moving past her to stand beside her husband, like they were presenting some kind of united front. They never agreed on anything except their mutual disappointment in Evelyn's existence. The stranger finally looked up. His eyes were gray, not cold exactly, but measuring, taking her in without apology. Evelyn lifted her chin and stared right back. "This is Caleb Grayson," her father said. "He owns the—" "I know who he is." Everyone in 3 counties knew Grayson, owned half the cattle in Oklahoma Territory, built his ranch from nothing after the land run, money that made even the railroad men nervous. "What's he doing in our house?" Her father flinched, actually flinched, like she'd hit him. Grayson spoke for the first time. His voice was quieter than she expected, Western flat and deliberate. "Your father owes me money. My father owes everyone money." "Evelyn," her father started. $12,000, Grayson continued, ignoring the interruption, plus interest accumulated over 8 months. "I've been patient. That patience has run out." 12,000. Evelyn's breath caught. She'd known it was bad. Her father's gambling always was. But that kind of money was impossible. Farm-destroying, life-destroying. "We don't have it," she said flatly. "Obviously." "No." Grayson's eyes hadn't left her face. "You don't." Margaret made a small, irritated sound. "Just get on with it, Joseph. Stop dragging this out." Evelyn's father wouldn't look at her. That's when real fear started crawling up her spine. "There's a solution," her father said to the floor. "Mr. Grayson has agreed to settle the debt under alternative terms." "What terms?" Silence. "What terms, Papa?" Grayson stood. He was taller than she'd realized, and when he moved around the desk, Evelyn had to fight the urge to step back. He didn't come close, though, just stood there, keeping a careful distance, like approaching a spooked horse. "You," he said simply. "The debt is forgiven. In exchange, you come to my ranch." The words didn't make sense at first. Evelyn's brain tried several different interpretations before landing on the only one that fit. "You're buying me." "No." His jaw tightened. "I'm offering you a place. Employment, if you want to call it that. Room, board, safety, your father's debt disappears. You get out of this house." "And what do I have to do to earn this generous offer?" Something flickered across Grayson's face. Surprise, maybe, or annoyance. "Nothing you don't agree to." "Forgive me if I don't find that reassuring." Her father made a broken sound. "Evie, please, it's this or—" He stopped. "Or what?" She rounded on him. What's the alternative you're not mentioning? Margaret answered instead, voice sharp as January wind. Harold Beckman offered to clear the debt last week. Your father was considering it before Mr. Grayson arrived. Evelyn's blood went cold. Harold Beckman was 63 years old, buried 2 wives already, and had a reputation that made decent women cross the street when they saw him coming. She'd seen the way he looked at her in church, like she was already naked. You were going to sell me to Harold Beckman. It wouldn't be selling, her father said weakly. He mentioned marriage. He mentioned owning me. Evelyn's voice cracked. Just like you're doing right now. I'm trying to save your life. Her father's composure finally shattered. You think Beckman would have asked permission? Would have waited for paperwork? He was coming here tomorrow, Evelyn. Tomorrow. With a preacher or without one. I couldn't have stopped him. At least this way. He gestured desperately at Grayson. At least he's decent. You don't know that. I do. Her father met her eyes for the first time. Harold would have broken you inside a month. Grayson is offering you a chance. Evelyn looked at the stranger who'd apparently been fighting over her like a poker pot. Grayson's expression hadn't changed, still calm, still measuring, still frustratingly unreadable. Why? She asked him directly. You could have anyone. Why buy a woman who doesn't want to be bought? I'm not buying you. Then what do you call this? A rescue. He said it so plainly, like it was obvious. Whether you believe that or not is your choice. But I'm leaving in an hour, and I'm asking you to come with me. Your father's debt gets settled either way. I already paid it. The room tilted. What? I paid him this morning before you came downstairs. The debt's cleared. You're not part of the transaction. Grayson's gray eyes locked on hers. You can stay here if you want. Wait for Beckman. Wait for whoever your father owes money to next week. Or you can take the horse I brought for you and ride out of here with a choice nobody else is offering. Evelyn's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her skirt, trying to think through the panic. I don't understand. You don't have to, not yet. Grayson picked up his hat from the desk. 1 hour. Pack light. If you're not ready, I leave alone. He walked out without looking back. Evelyn stood in the wreckage of her father's study, everything she thought she knew breaking apart. Her father sagged into his chair like someone had cut his strings. Margaret's face showed nothing, not relief, not guilt, just that same terrible blankness. You should pack, Margaret said eventually. Should I? Better than the alternative. Evelyn laughed, sharp and bitter. Which one? There seem to be so many. Her father raised his head. I'm sorry, Evie, I know it's not enough, but I am sorry. For the debt? Or for selling your daughter to pay it? He's not... Her father stopped. Grayson's a good man. Everyone says so. Built his ranch honest, treats his people fair. His people. Evelyn tasted the words. That's what I am now. One of his people. Better his than Beckman's. The worst part was he wasn't wrong. Evelyn had seen what happened to women who ended up in Harold Beckman's house. The lucky ones died quick. She turned and walked upstairs without another word. Bug. Her room was small and shabby, but it was hers. Had been since her mother died when Evelyn was 9. Margaret moved in 6 months later with her daughter Violet, and suddenly Evelyn became the unwanted reminder of the first wife, the better wife, the one Joseph Mercer apparently loved too much to ever recover from losing. She pulled her carpet bag from under the bed and started packing. Not much to take. 2 dresses besides the one she wore, a shawl her mother had made. Underthings. The book she'd been reading, even though she'd read it 4 times already. A romance about a girl who ran away west and found freedom. Funny that. Freedom. A quiet knock on the door. Go away, Margaret. It's me. Violet's voice, tentative. Evelyn almost ignored her, but something made her open the door. Her stepsister stood in the hallway, perfectly dressed as always, blonde and delicate and everything Evelyn wasn't. What do you want? Violet's blue eyes were wet. I didn't know. About Beckman. About any of it. Papa didn't tell me until this morning. And you're here to what? Apologize on his behalf? I'm here to tell you to go. Violet stepped closer, voice dropping. Evelyn, please, take Grayson's offer. Get out of this house. Suddenly concerned about me? Violet stopped, frustration crossing her face. You think I liked watching Mother treat you like dirt? You think I enjoyed being the favorite by default? You never said anything. Neither did you. Violet's jaw set. We both survived the only way we knew how. But this is your chance to stop surviving and actually live. Don't waste it because you're too proud to accept help. It's not help, it's ownership with better manners. Maybe. Violet reached out and squeezed Evelyn's hand. Or maybe it's exactly what he said. A rescue. Either way, it's better than waiting here to die. She left before Evelyn could respond. 45 minutes later, Evelyn stood on the front porch with her carpet bag and her mother's shawl and a heart beating so hard it hurt. The sky had gone dark and bruised, storm clouds rolling in from the west. Fitting. Caleb Grayson sat on his horse at the end of the path, leading a second mare, a pretty sorrel with kind eyes. He'd kept his word about the hour, hadn't rushed her, hadn't come to the door demanding she hurry, just waited. Her father appeared behind her. Evie, whoa, don't. She didn't turn around. Don't make this harder than it already is. I loved your mother. I know. I'm a weak man. I always have been. She knew it too, but she loved me anyway, and I never understood why. His voice broke. I failed her, and I failed you, I know that. Evelyn closed her eyes. Goodbye, Papa. She walked down the path without looking back. Grayson dismounted as she approached, taking her bag and securing it to the sorrel's saddle with efficient, practiced movements. Up close, she noticed things she'd missed in the study, the scar along his jawline, the calluses on his hands, the weight he carried in his shoulders like someone used to being responsible for everything. You can still change your mind, he said quietly. And go where? Anywhere. I meant what I said. The debt's paid. You're free to choose. Evelyn looked at the house behind her, peeling paint, sagging porch, the window where her mother used to watch for her father to come home from town. All the years of trying to be good enough, small enough, quiet enough to deserve staying. Free, she repeated. The word felt foreign in her mouth. Grayson's expression softened slightly. It'll take some getting used to. What will? Believing it. He helped her mount, his hands careful and impersonal, touching only where necessary, and swung up onto his own horse. The storm was closer now, the air electric with coming rain. How far is your ranch? Evelyn asked. 2 days hard riding, 3 if we're careful. And what happens when we get there? Grayson looked at her fully then, those gray eyes steady and serious. You get a room with a lock. You get 3 meals a day. You get time to figure out what you want to do next. That's it? That's it. You're lying. No, Miss Mercer, I'm not. He turned his horse west toward the darkening sky. But I don't expect you to believe me yet. Trust isn't given. It's earned. I'm willing to do the work. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Evelyn took one last look at the only home she'd ever known. The place that never wanted her, the family that never chose her, the life that had ground her down to nothing. Then she touched her heels to the sorrel's sides and followed the stranger into the storm. They rode hard for the first hour, trying to outrun the weather. Didn't work. The rain caught them just as the sun disappeared, turning the prairie into a slick, treacherous mess. Grayson led them to a small outcropping of rocks that provided minimal shelter, enough to keep the horses dry, not much else. We'll wait it out, he said, dismounting. Too dangerous to ride in this. Evelyn slid down from her horse, legs aching. She wasn't used to riding for hours at a stretch. Her body was already protesting. Grayson noticed her grimace. You hurt? I'm fine. You're not a good liar. I'm fine enough. She leaned against the rock face, trying to take weight off her screaming thighs. How much farther tonight? We're stopping here. Here? There's nothing here. There's shelter and water and level ground. That's enough. He was already untacking the horses, movements efficient despite the rain. I've got bedrolls. You'll stay dry. Evelyn watched him work, this stranger who'd bought her father's debt and called it rescue. He didn't look like a liar, didn't act like one either, but she'd learned young that the most dangerous men were often the ones who seemed safest. Why'd you really pay off the debt? She asked. Grayson paused, his hand stilling on the saddle strap. I told you. You told me a story. I want the truth. The truth? He turned to face her, rain dripping off his hat. The truth is Harold Beckman is a vicious bastard who hurts women for sport. The truth is your father was going to hand you over tomorrow. The truth is I couldn't let that happen. Why not? I'm nothing to you. Something crossed Grayson's face, an emotion too quick to name. You're not nothing. You don't know me. No, he agreed. I don't, but I know Beckman, and I know what he does to women nobody protects. His jaw tightened. My wife used to volunteer at the church. She'd help the women who showed up with nowhere else to go. Most of them came from Beckman's house. What they told her... He stopped. She died trying to help one of them escape. Beckman's men ran them off the road. Carriage went over an embankment. The rain filled the silence. I'm sorry, Evelyn said finally. It was 3 years ago. That doesn't make it hurt less. Grayson looked at her then, really looked, and something in his expression shifted. No, it doesn't. He went back to tending the horses, and Evelyn stood in the rain, trying to reconcile this new information with the transaction she'd witnessed that morning. If he was telling the truth, if his wife had died because of Beckman, then maybe this really was about rescue. Maybe she'd stumbled into the one version of this story where the stranger wasn't the villain, or maybe he was just a better liar than most. Grayson finished with the horses and pulled 2 bedrolls from his pack. He handed her one, along with a tin of jerky and hardtack. It's not much, he said. We'll get real food tomorrow when we reach Guthrie Station. Evelyn took the food, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. She hadn't eaten since yesterday. Thank you. You don't have to thank me for basic decency. In my experience, basic decency is pretty rare. Then you've been living around the wrong people. She almost smiled at that. Almost. They ate in silence, the rain drumming steadily on the rocks above. Evelyn spread her bedroll on the driest patch of ground she could find and sat down, every muscle screaming. Grayson stayed standing, keeping watch on the horses and the dark prairie beyond. You should sleep, he said without turning around. I'll keep watch. What if I don't trust you? Smart. You shouldn't. Not yet. He glanced back at her. But I'm going to keep watch whether you sleep or not. Might as well rest while you can. Evelyn pulled her mother's shawl tighter around her shoulders. What's your ranch like? Big? Remote? Good water? Better grass? Built the house myself after the land run. Nothing fancy, but it's solid. Do you have staff? Some. A foreman, couple of hands, a woman who cooks and keeps house. Good people. They'll leave you alone unless you want company. And what exactly will my role be? You never said. Grayson was quiet for a long moment. Whatever you want it to be. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. He turned to face her fully. Miss Mercer, I didn't bring you to my ranch to work you like a servant or... He stopped, jaw tightening. I brought you because leaving you in that house felt wrong. What happens next is your decision. You want to leave once we get there, I'll give you money and a horse and send you anywhere you want to go. You want to stay, you stay. But you're not obligated to me. Not now. Not ever. Why should I believe you? You shouldn't, but time will prove it one way or another. Evelyn studied him in the dim light. This quiet, careful man who spoke like he'd thought about every word before it left his mouth. He didn't sound like he was lying, but then the best liars never did. I'm going to hold you to that, she said. Good. She lay down, using her carpetbag as a pillow, and pulled the bedroll around herself. The ground was hard and cold, the rain was loud, and everything about this situation was terrifying. But somehow, despite all of that, exhaustion won. Her last thought before sleep took her was that Caleb Grayson's eyes were the color of a winter sky, and just as impossible to read. She woke to silence and pale dawn light. The rain had stopped. Grayson sat with his back against the rocks, arms folded, eyes closed. Not asleep exactly, she could tell by the tension in his shoulders, but resting. Evelyn sat up slowly, trying not to make noise. Failed. Grayson's eyes opened immediately. Morning, he said. Did you sleep at all? Enough. That's not an answer. The corner of his mouth twitched. Might have been a smile. You're persistent. I'm practical. If you fall off your horse from exhaustion, I don't know the way to your ranch. Fair point. He stood, stretching carefully. We should move. Want to make Guthrie by noon. They packed in comfortable silence, or at least it should have been comfortable. Evelyn kept catching herself watching him, looking for signs of deception or danger. But Grayson just did what needed doing, tacked the horses, checked the gear, handed her jerky for breakfast without comment. Normal. He acted completely normal, like buying women out of debt was just another Tuesday morning. The ride to Guthrie Station took 4 hours. The town appeared on the horizon like a promise. Wooden buildings, dirt streets, the kind of rough frontier settlement that existed because the railroad needed it to. They stopped at a hotel restaurant that smelled like bacon and coffee and salvation. Evelyn realized she was starving. Grayson got them a table in the back and ordered enough food for 4 people. When it arrived, eggs, bacon, biscuits, gravy, coffee, Evelyn almost cried. "Eat," Grayson said, pushing the plates toward her. "We've got a long ride ahead." She didn't need to be told twice. They ate in silence for a while, until Evelyn's hunger faded enough for curiosity to take over. "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask. Doesn't mean I'll answer." "Why aren't you married?" Grayson's fork paused halfway to his mouth. "Excuse me?" "You're wealthy. You own half of Oklahoma Territory. You're not—" She stopped, feeling her face heat. "You're not bad looking. Why haven't you remarried?" "That's bold." "You did just purchase the right to dictate my entire future. I think I've earned bold." "I didn't purchase anything." "Semantics." He set his fork down, considering her. "I loved my wife. When she died, I didn't see the point in replacing her." "But 3 years—" "Time doesn't heal everything, Miss Mercer. Sometimes it just makes the wound easier to carry." His gray eyes met hers. "I built my ranch because I needed something to do with my hands besides drink myself to death. It worked, mostly, but sharing it with someone else, that wasn't part of the plan." "Then why am I here?" "Because some things matter more than plans." The honesty in his voice made her chest tight. Evelyn looked down at her plate, suddenly unable to meet his gaze. "I don't know how to do this." "Do what?" "Trust someone. Believe they might actually be decent." She forced herself to look at him. "Everyone I've ever trusted has hurt me. My father, my stepmother, even my mother, by dying and leaving me with them. I don't know how to believe you're different." Grayson was quiet for a long moment. Then, "My wife used to say, trust is like breaking a horse. You can't force it. You have to be patient, consistent. Prove yourself over and over until one day the horse stops fighting and lets you close." "I'm not a horse." "No, but the principle stands." He leaned back in his chair. "I'm not asking you to trust me today, Miss Mercer. I'm asking you to let me prove I'm worth trusting eventually. That's all." Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to find the flaw in his logic, the crack in his armor. But sitting there in that rough frontier restaurant, watching this quiet man who spoke about his dead wife with painful honesty, she couldn't quite manage it. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay? I'll give you the chance to prove it, but I'm watching you, Mr. Grayson. And if you're lying, if this is some elaborate game, I'll make you regret it." That almost smile appeared again. Noted. They finished breakfast and hit the road. The ranch appeared just before sunset on the second day, a sprawling collection of buildings tucked into a valley with a creek running through it. The main house was exactly what Grayson had described. Big, solid, nothing fancy, but it looked cared for. Loved, even. "Home," Grayson said simply. Evelyn's throat tightened unexpectedly. She'd never had a place that felt like home, just houses she existed in until they kicked her out. A woman emerged from the main house as they approached, older, weathered, with sharp eyes and capable hands. "About time," she called. "Was starting to think you'd run off." "Just took longer than expected, Mrs. Chen." Grayson dismounted and helped Evelyn down. "This is Evelyn Mercer. She'll be staying with us." Mrs. Chen's sharp eyes took in everything. Evelyn's worn dress, her exhaustion, the careful way Grayson kept distance between them. "I've got the East Room ready. Fresh linens, lock on the door like you asked." "Thank you." Mrs. Chen turned to Evelyn. "You hungry, girl?" Yes. Thank you." "Then come on. I've got stew and cornbread." She headed back to the house without waiting for agreement. Grayson caught Evelyn's elbow gently. "That's Mrs. Chen. She's been with me since I built this place. Doesn't take nonsense from anyone, including me. You'll be safe with her. Safe from what? Everything. He released her arm. Go eat. I'll bring your bag up in a minute. Evelyn followed Mrs. Chen into the house, her heart pounding. The interior was warm and clean, smelling like wood smoke and cooking. Nothing ostentatious, just solid and real. Mrs. Chen led her upstairs to a room at the end of the hall. Here, it's yours. The room was simple but comfortable. A real bed, a dresser, a window looking out over the valley, and on the bedside table, almost hidden in shadow, sat a book. Evelyn's breath caught. She crossed the room and picked it up with shaking hands. The cover was worn, the pages soft from reading, and she knew this book, had mentioned it years ago to a stranger at a market while her father conducted business. A romance about a girl who ran west to find freedom. Mr. Grayson left that for you, Mrs. Chen said from the doorway. Said you might want something familiar. Evelyn couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, because suddenly the silence around Caleb Grayson didn't feel ordinary anymore. It felt personal and dangerous, and terrifying in a way that had nothing to do with fear. Evelyn stood in that simple bedroom holding the worn novel like it might explode, her mind racing through possibilities she didn't want to consider. Mrs. Chen had already left, footsteps fading down the hallway, leaving her alone with a book that shouldn't exist here. She opened the cover with trembling fingers. There, on the inside page, written in faded pencil, E.M., Market Day, June 1869, 7 years ago. Her handwriting. She'd written her initials in this exact book while standing at a trading stall, talking to a man whose face she could barely remember. They discussed the story for maybe 10 minutes while her father argued with a merchant 3 stalls down. The stranger had been polite, interested in her opinions about the ending. She'd thought nothing of it afterward. Apparently, he had. The door downstairs opened and closed. Boots on the wooden floor, moving toward the kitchen. Caleb's voice, low and tired, talking to Mrs. Chen about something Evelyn couldn't make out. She set the book down carefully and walked to the window, trying to breathe normally. The valley stretched out below, painted gold and purple in the dying light. Beautiful. Isolated. Miles from anywhere. A knock on her door made her jump. Miss Mercer? Caleb's voice, careful. Mrs. Chen has food ready if you're hungry. Evelyn pressed her palms against the windowsill, steadying herself. I'll be down in a minute. Silence. Then, take your time. His footsteps retreated. She waited until her hands stopped shaking before heading downstairs. The kitchen was warm and bright, a fire crackling in the stone hearth. Mrs. Chen ladled stew into bowls while Caleb sat at a rough wooden table, looking like exhaustion had finally caught up with him. He'd removed his hat and coat. His hair was dark with sweat, his shirt collar open. He looked younger somehow, more human. He stood when Evelyn entered, old-fashioned manners that felt strange after years of her father barely acknowledging her existence. Sit, Mrs. Chen ordered, pointing at a chair across from Caleb. Both of you. Food's getting cold. Evelyn sat. Caleb followed suit, watching her with those unreadable gray eyes. Mrs. Chen set bowls in front of them, along with thick slices of cornbread and real butter. Evelyn's stomach growled audibly. When's the last time you ate properly? Mrs. Chen demanded. Yesterday morning, maybe the day before. Christ! Mrs. Chen shot a look at Caleb. You didn't feed her? We ate in Guthrie, Caleb said mildly. That was 12 hours ago. Mrs. Chen turned back to Evelyn. Eat. All of it. I won't have you wasting away in this house. Evelyn picked up her spoon, hyper-aware of Caleb watching her. The book, she said quietly, on the bedside table. Caleb's expression didn't change. You mentioned it once. Thought you might like having it. 7 years ago. Yes. At a market. Yes. Evelyn set her spoon down. Why do you remember that? Mrs. Chen made an impatient sound and left the kitchen, muttering something about letting them talk in private. The door swung shut behind her. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming once against the table before going still. I remember a lot of things I probably shouldn't. That's not an answer. No, it's not. He met her gaze steadily. You want the truth? I think I've earned it. You talked about that book like it mattered, like the story meant something to you. Most people I met back then only cared about money or land or getting ahead. He paused. You cared about whether the ending was honest, whether the girl actually got to be free, or if the author cheated and gave her a husband instead. I'd never heard anyone talk about a book like that. So you bought it. The next week. Read it cover to cover. A slight self-deprecating smile crossed his face. Wanted to see what you saw in it. And you were right. The ending was honest. She didn't need saving. She saved herself. Evelyn's throat felt tight. You've been carrying that book for 7 years. Yes. That's... She stopped, searching for the right word. Couldn't find it. Why? Caleb looked down at his untouched stew. My wife died 6 months after that market day. When I was building this place, trying not to drink myself to death like I told you, that book sat on my nightstand. Reminded me there were still people in the world who believed in honest endings, who thought freedom mattered more than security. He looked up. Reminded me of you. You didn't know me. No, but I knew you existed, and somehow that was enough. The fireplace popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Evelyn felt like the floor had shifted beneath her chair, leaving her grasping for balance. When you heard about the debt, she said slowly, about Beckman, you came because of a 10-minute conversation 7 years ago? I came because letting you go to that bastard felt wrong. Caleb's voice went hard. The conversation just meant I knew exactly who I was trying to protect. You could have sent money, paid the debt anonymously. Your father would have gambled it away and sold you to the next bidder. So you bought me instead. I gave you a choice. He leaned forward slightly. Miss Mercer, I know how this looks. Rich man swoops in, pays off the debt, brings the girl to his isolated ranch. Every story you've ever heard says I'm the villain. Maybe I am. But I'm asking you to wait before deciding. Give it time. See if my actions match my words. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to find the lie hiding in his earnest gray eyes. But sitting there in his kitchen, eating his food, wearing the dust from his road, she couldn't quite manage it. The lock on my door, she said instead. Does it actually work? Yes? You have a key? No, just you. He stood, pulling something from his pocket and setting it on the table between them. A brass key, simple and solid. That's the only one. I had it made in Guthrie before we left. Evelyn picked it up. The metal was warm from his pocket. You're sure? I'm sure. She closed her fist around the key. Okay? Okay? I'll wait. I'll watch. And if you're lying to me, Caleb Grayson, she met his eyes. I'll burn this whole ranch down on my way out. That almost smile appeared again, fuller this time, real. Fair enough. They ate in silence after that, but it felt different than before. Less like two strangers navigating a transaction, and more like two people trying to figure out if trust was even possible between them. After dinner, Caleb showed her the rest of the house. The library he'd built with books he actually read, the back porch that looked out over the creek, the room he used as an office with maps and ledgers scattered across every surface. He moved through the space like someone who'd built it with his own hands and still couldn't quite believe it was his. You really did start from nothing, Evelyn said, looking at a framed document on the wall. His land claim from the run, stamped and official. 20 acres and a dream. Caleb stood beside her, close enough she could feel the warmth coming off him. Grew it one piece at a time. Bought out neighbors who couldn't make it. Traded favors for water rights. Learned cattle from scratch. He paused. It's not pretty work, but it's mine. No one helped you? Mrs. Chen, my foreman Jack, a few others along the way. He glanced at her. My wife, before she died. She believed in this place when it was just mud and hope. What was her name? Sarah. He said it softly, like the name still hurt. Sarah Chen. Mrs. Chen's daughter. Evelyn's eyes widened. I didn't realize. Most people don't. Mrs. Chen doesn't talk about her much. Easier that way. Caleb turned away from the document. You should rest. Tomorrow I'll show you the rest of the ranch if you want. Or you can stay inside, whatever you prefer. What do you want me to do? I want you to do whatever makes you feel safe. He left her standing in his office, surrounded by evidence of a life built from dirt and stubbornness, and Evelyn realized she was in serious trouble. Because Caleb Grayson was either exactly what he claimed to be, a decent man trying to do right by someone who needed help, or he was the most dangerous kind of liar, the kind who almost made you believe. She went upstairs, locked her door with the key that had no duplicate, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep didn't come for hours. The next morning started with a rooster screaming bloody murder outside her window. Evelyn jolted awake, disoriented, before remembering where she was. Caleb's ranch, the room with the lock, the book on the nightstand. She dressed quickly in her second-best dress and headed downstairs. Mrs. Chen was already in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with the focused intensity of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. "Coffee's on the stove," Mrs. Chen said without looking up. "Caleb's in the barn. Said to let you sleep." Evelyn poured herself coffee, real coffee, strong and black, and sat at the table. "How long have you worked here?" "Since the beginning. Helped him build this house with my own hands." Mrs. Chen's voice was matter-of-fact. "After Sarah died, he wanted to burn the whole thing down. I told him that was stupid and wasteful, so we kept building instead." "I'm sorry about your daughter." Mrs. Chen's hand stilled for a moment, then resumed kneading. "She was a good girl. Too good for this world, probably. But she loved that stubborn fool out there, and he loved her back. That counts for something." "Does it bother you? That I'm here?" "Why would it?" "Because I'm—" Evelyn stopped, unsure how to finish. "Because Caleb brought you here?" Mrs. Chen finally looked up, her dark eyes sharp. "Girl, I know my son-in-law. He doesn't do anything without thinking it through 6 ways to Sunday. If he brought you to this ranch, he had a damn good reason. And since you're sitting in my kitchen drinking coffee instead of locked in a room somewhere, I'd say his reason was decent." "He told you about Beckman?" "Didn't have to. I know what that bastard does to women." Mrs. Chen went back to her dough. "Caleb did right by you. Question is, what are you going to do with it?" Evelyn didn't have an answer for that. She spent the morning exploring the house, careful not to touch anything that wasn't explicitly hers. The place was bigger than she'd realized, with rooms that suggested Caleb had built it planning for a family that never came. A nursery sat empty upstairs, painted yellow, furniture covered in sheets. She didn't go inside. Around noon, Caleb appeared on the back porch where she'd been sitting, watching the creek. "Hungry?" he asked. "Always." "Come on, I'll show you the rest of the ranch." He led her to the barn, where 2 horses stood already saddled, his black gelding and the sorrel mare she'd ridden from Guthrie. Evelyn's legs still ached from 2 days of riding, but she mounted without complaint. They rode out across the valley in comfortable silence. The land was beautiful in that stark, endless way the frontier had, all grass and sky, and nothing else for miles. Caleb pointed out boundary markers, water sources, places where the cattle liked to gather. He spoke about the ranch the way some men spoke about their children, with pride and worry mixed together. "You really love this place," Evelyn said. "It's the only thing I've built that didn't fall apart." He glanced at her, present company excluded. "I'm not yours to build." "No, you're not." He pulled his horse to a stop on a rise overlooking the entire valley. "That's why I like you." Evelyn's heart kicked against her ribs. "You don't know me well enough to like me. I know you're smart enough to question everything, brave enough to tell me when you think I'm lying, stubborn enough to survive a father who didn't deserve you." He turned in his saddle to face her fully. "That's enough to start with." "Start what?" "Friendship, maybe, if you'll allow it." Friendship. The word felt strange. Evelyn had never had a friend, not really. Violet came closest, and even that was complicated by years of Margaret pitting them against each other. "I don't know how to be friends with someone who holds this much power over me," she admitted. "Then we'll figure it out together." Caleb's expression was serious. "I'm not asking you to trust me blindly, Miss Mercer. I'm asking you to let me prove I'm worth trusting. That takes time. I've got plenty of that." They rode back as the sun started dropping toward the horizon. Mrs. Chen had dinner ready, roasted chicken, potatoes, greens from the garden. Evelyn ate until her stomach hurt, marveling at the simple fact of having enough food. That night, she locked her door and read the worn novel by lamplight. The girl in the story ran west to escape a marriage she didn't want. Found work on a ranch, learned to rope cattle and read the weather, eventually built her own spread with money she earned herself. No husband appeared to save her, no convenient inheritance. Just work and luck and stubbornness. Evelyn fell asleep with the book open on her chest, dreaming of freedom that looked like hard work and empty skies. The days started to blur together after that. She'd wake to the rooster, eat breakfast with Mrs. Chen, spend mornings reading or helping in the kitchen. Afternoons, Caleb would appear and offer to show her something new: how to tell good pasture from bad, how to check a horse's hooves, how to predict rain by the smell of the air. He never pushed, never demanded, just offered and waited to see if she'd accept. Slowly, carefully, she started to accept. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Evelyn's hands developed calluses from helping with small tasks around the ranch. Her face got sun-darkened despite Mrs. Chen's warnings about her complexion. She learned the names of Caleb's ranch hands: Jack, the foreman who'd been with him since the beginning; Miguel and his brother Carlos, who handled the cattle; young Tommy, who was learning the trade and asked too many questions. They all treated her with cautious respect, following Caleb's lead. No one asked questions, no one made assumptions. She was just Evelyn, the woman staying at the main house, and that was enough. She started to relax, started to believe that maybe, possibly, Caleb had been telling the truth. That's when Violet showed up. Evelyn was hanging laundry in the side yard, a task Mrs. Chen had taught her with surprising patience, when she heard the wagon. She looked up to see a hired rig coming up the road, expensive and out of place on the rough frontier track. Her stomach dropped. The wagon pulled to a stop in front of the main house. Violet stepped down, perfectly dressed in traveling clothes that probably cost more than Evelyn had owned in her entire life. Her blonde hair was pinned up elegantly, her face shaded by a fashionable hat. She looked like everything Evelyn wasn't. "Evelyn," Violet called, waving like they were old friends meeting for tea. "There you are!" Evelyn set down the laundry basket and walked over slowly, dread building with each step. "What are you doing here? Is that any way to greet your sister?" Violet's smile was bright and false. "I've been worried sick about you." "I find that hard to believe." Violet's smile tightened slightly. "Can we talk? Privately?" "No." "Evelyn, please, I came all this way. I didn't ask you to." Evelyn crossed her arms. "Whatever you're here for, the answer is no." The front door opened. Caleb emerged, his expression unreadable, but his posture alert. He took in the expensive wagon, Violet's fine clothes, the tension in Evelyn's shoulders. "Problem?" he asked mildly. "No problem," Violet said quickly, turning on the charm. "I'm Violet Mercer, Evelyn's sister. I came to check on her, make sure she's being treated well." "She's being treated fine. I'd like to hear that from her if you don't mind." Violet's tone stayed sweet, but Evelyn heard the steel underneath. "Privately." Caleb looked at Evelyn. "Your call." Evelyn wanted to send Violet away immediately, but curiosity won. 5 minutes, in the kitchen." They went inside, leaving Caleb on the porch. Mrs. Chen took one look at Violet and disappeared into the pantry, giving them space. Violet sat at the kitchen table and pulled a folded document from her handbag. "Papa sent me." "Of course he did." "The debt agreement is flawed, Evelyn. Our lawyer looked at it. You shouldn't be here." Evelyn's blood went cold. "What are you talking about?" "The territorial law requires 2 witnesses for debt transfers involving—" Violet stopped, choosing her words carefully. "Involving people. The document Papa signed only has 1. Technically, the agreement is invalid." So you need to come home, before this becomes a legal mess." Violet pushed the document across the table. "I brought the paperwork to void the agreement. All you have to do is sign." Evelyn stared at the papers without touching them. "And then what? Go back to waiting for Beckman?" "Beckman withdrew his offer. Papa found other buyers for the farm." "Things are better now." "You're lying." Violet's perfect composure cracked slightly. "I'm trying to help you." "No, you're trying to fix Papa's mess. Again." Evelyn leaned forward. "Tell me the truth. What does he owe now? Who's threatening him?" "It's not like that. It's always like that." Evelyn's voice went hard. "He gambled again, didn't he? Lost money he didn't have. And now you're here trying to drag me back to sell me to whoever's holding the debt this time." Violet's face flushed. "You don't understand the position he's in." "I understand perfectly. He's weak and selfish, and he'll sacrifice anyone to save himself, including me, including you, eventually. He's our father." "He stopped being my father the day he signed those papers." Evelyn stood. I'm not coming back, Violet. Find another way to save him. Evelyn, please. 5 minutes are up. Leave. Violet's eyes filled with tears. Real ones, Evelyn thought. I didn't want to do this, but Papa said if you won't come willingly. She stopped. What? He'll drag me back? Force me? Evelyn laughed bitterly. Let him try. The kitchen door opened. Caleb stood there, and whatever Violet saw in his expression made her go pale. Time to go, he said quietly. Violet stood, gathering her papers with shaking hands. At the door, she turned back. He hasn't told you why he really wanted you here. The words hit like a slap. Evelyn's breath caught. Violet saw her reaction and pressed the advantage. Ask him about the market, Evelyn. Ask him what else happened that day. Ask him why he really remembers you. Then she was gone, climbing into her hired wagon, disappearing down the road in a cloud of dust. Evelyn stood frozen in the kitchen, Violet's poisonous words echoing in her head. Caleb remained in the doorway, his face carefully blank. What did she mean? Evelyn asked. I don't know. Yes, you do. Her voice rose. What else happened at the market? What aren't you telling me? Caleb's jaw tightened. Nothing that changes anything. That's not an answer. Evelyn, don't. She backed away from him, all the trust she'd carefully built crumbling. Don't lie to me, not now. What did Violet mean? He was quiet for a long moment, something like pain crossing his face. I need to check the north fence. Storm's coming. We'll talk when I get back. Caleb, But he was already gone, leaving Evelyn alone in the kitchen with doubt eating through her like acid. Mrs. Chen emerged from the pantry. You okay? No. Evelyn sank into a chair. I don't know what to believe anymore. Believe what you've seen with your own eyes. Caleb's treated you decent since you got here. That's worth something. Is it? Or is it just better manipulation? Mrs. Chen sat across from her. You want my honest opinion? Please. That girl didn't come here out of sisterly concern. She came because someone sent her to stir up trouble. And the best way to control you is to make you doubt the one person who's been protecting you. You don't know that. Don't I? Mrs. Chen's eyes were sharp. I've lived a long time, girl. Long enough to recognize a snake when I see one. Your sister's scared, and scared people do desperate things. She said the debt agreement is flawed. Then let it be flawed. You're not leaving, are you? Evelyn realized with a start that she wasn't. Despite everything, despite Violet's warnings and the doubt eating at her, she didn't want to leave this ranch. Didn't want to leave the quiet safety she'd found here. Didn't want to leave Caleb. And that terrified her more than anything else. The storm hit an hour later, fierce and sudden, the way plain storms did. Rain hammered the roof while wind screamed around the house. Evelyn watched from the kitchen window, worry building as the sky went dark. Caleb still wasn't back. He's fine, Mrs. Chen said, reading her expression. Man knows this land better than anyone. He'll wait out the worst of it somewhere safe. But Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. 2 hours passed. 3. The storm started to break, rain easing to a drizzle, but Caleb's horse still stood in the barn, unsaddled and dry. He'd gone out on foot. Evelyn grabbed a coat from the hook by the door. I'm going to look for him. You don't know the land? Then tell me where the north fence is. Mrs. Chen sighed but gave her directions. Evelyn headed out into the rain, her boots immediately sinking into mud. She found him 20 minutes later, crouched beside a section of fence that had partially collapsed. He was soaked through, working to prop up a broken post with his bare hands, bleeding from a cut on his forehead. What the hell are you doing out here? Evelyn demanded. Caleb looked up, surprise crossing his face. What are you doing out here? Coming to find your stubborn ass before you got yourself killed. She splashed through the mud to his side. You're bleeding. It's nothing. It's not nothing. She pulled the scarf from her neck and pressed it against the cut. Hold this. He obeyed, watching her with something like wonder. You came looking for me. You didn't come back. I was worried. She looked at the broken fence. This couldn't wait until tomorrow? Cattle could get out, lose half the herd if they scatter in a storm. He winced as she pressed harder on the cut. Had to fix it. By yourself, in a storm, while bleeding. Yes. Evelyn wanted to yell at him, wanted to demand answers about what Violet had meant, about what secrets he was still keeping. But standing there in the mud and rain, watching this ridiculous man try to save his fence with his bare hands, she couldn't manage it. "Come on," she said instead. "Mrs. Chen can patch you up properly." They walked back to the house in silence, close enough their shoulders brushed. Caleb's hand found hers somewhere along the way. Not possessive, just steadying, and Evelyn didn't pull away. Mrs. Chen took one look at them and pointed at the kitchen table. "Sit, both of you." She cleaned Caleb's cut with efficient, painful precision while Evelyn made coffee. The silence stretched thin and fragile, full of questions no one wanted to ask. Finally, Caleb spoke. "What your sister said, about the market." Evelyn's hand stilled on the coffee pot. "You don't have to—" "Yes, I do." He looked at her directly. "I told you we talked about the book. That's true. But I left something out." Her heart hammered. "What?" "Your father showed up drunk while we were talking, started yelling at you in the middle of the market, called you worthless, said you were a burden he couldn't wait to be rid of." Caleb's voice went flat. "You stood there and took it, didn't cry, didn't fight back, just waited until he finished and walked away like nothing happened." Evelyn's throat closed. She remembered that day now, remembered the humiliation. "That's when I knew," Caleb continued, "that you were strong enough to survive anything, but you shouldn't have to. No one should have to endure that kind of cruelty and just accept it as normal." He paused. "So yes, I remembered you, and when I heard Beckman was coming for you, I couldn't—" His voice broke slightly. "I couldn't let it happen." The kitchen was silent except for the rain on the roof. "Why didn't you tell me?" Evelyn whispered. Because it makes me sound like exactly what Violet's trying to convince you I am. Some stranger who got obsessed with a woman he barely knew." Caleb met her eyes. "Maybe that's what I am. I don't know anymore. But everything else I told you is true. The debt's paid. You're free. And I'll keep my word even if you decide to leave tomorrow." Evelyn set down the coffee pot before she dropped it. "I don't want to leave." "You don't?" "No." She turned to face him fully. "I'm terrified of staying, terrified of trusting you, terrified of what it means that I'm starting to—" She stopped, unable to finish. "Starting to what?" "Care." The word came out barely audible. "About this place. About whether you come back from stupid fence repairs alive. About—" She stopped again. Caleb stood slowly, careful not to spook her. "Evelyn, don't." She held up a hand. "Don't say anything. I need time to figure out what this is, what we are, if we're anything at all." He nodded, respect and something that might have been hope crossing his face. "Take all the time you need." Mrs. Chen cleared her throat. "Both of you need dry clothes and rest. This can wait until tomorrow." She was right. Evelyn went upstairs, changed into her nightgown, and locked her door out of habit. Then she stood there, key in hand, realizing that for the first time since arriving, she didn't feel like she needed the lock to feel safe. That realization scared her almost as much as Violet's visit had. She climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain slow and finally stop. Somewhere in the house, Caleb moved around. She heard his door close, heard the house settle into night quiet. The book on her nightstand caught her eye. She picked it up, flipping to the ending she'd read a dozen times. The girl built her ranch, lived free, made her own choices. But Evelyn had always thought the ending felt incomplete somehow, like the author had left something unsaid, like freedom by itself wasn't quite enough. She set the book down and closed her eyes, trying not to think about gray eyes and careful hands, and a man who'd remembered her for 7 years. Trying not to think about what it might mean that she'd stopped wanting to leave. Trying not to think about what would happen when she finally admitted to herself that Caleb Grayson had become more than just her rescuer. The next morning came too bright and too early. Evelyn woke with her mind still churning through everything from the day before. Violet's appearance, Caleb's confession, the way her heart had lurched when she'd found him bleeding by that fence. She dressed slowly, trying to sort through feelings she didn't have names for. When she came downstairs, Caleb was already gone. A note on the kitchen table said he'd ridden out to check the damage from the storm. Mrs. Chen was conspicuously absent, probably giving Evelyn space to think. She poured coffee and sat in the empty kitchen, trying to decide what she wanted. Not what she should want, or what made sense, but what her actual heart was telling her beneath all the fear and doubt. The problem was, her heart was saying things she wasn't ready to hear. 3 days passed in strange, careful quiet. Caleb kept his distance, treating her with the same respect he always had, but adding something new, caution, like he was afraid of pushing too hard. They spoke at meals, worked side by side on small tasks, existed in the same space without ever quite acknowledging the shift between them. Evelyn hated it, hated the tension, hated not knowing where she stood. On the 4th morning, she found Caleb in the barn checking on a mare that was due to foal any day. He looked up when she entered, surprise crossing his face. "Morning," he said carefully. "We need to talk." His shoulders tensed. "All right." Evelyn closed the barn door behind her, suddenly nervous. "I've been thinking about what you said about the market. Evelyn, Let me finish." She took a breath. "I spent 3 days trying to be angry about it, trying to convince myself you're some kind of obsessive stranger who built a fantasy around a woman you barely knew, but I can't make myself believe it." Caleb set down the brush he'd been using on the mare. "Why not?" "Because you've had weeks to act on that fantasy, to push for more than you promised, and you haven't." She moved closer, her boots quiet on the straw-covered floor. "You gave me a locked door and space and time. You let me decide everything. That's not obsession, that's—" She struggled for the word. "What?" His voice was rough. "Decency. Real decency, not the performance of it." She stopped a few feet away from him. "I don't know what this is between us. I don't know if I trust it yet, but I'm tired of pretending I don't feel anything." Something blazed in Caleb's eyes. Hope, maybe, or relief. "What do you feel?" "Safe. For the first time in my life, I feel safe." The admission came out quieter than she intended. "And I'm starting to think that maybe safety isn't enough anymore. Maybe I want—" The barn door crashed open. Jack, the foreman, stood there breathing hard. "Caleb, north pasture. You need to see this now." Caleb's expression shifted immediately to business. "What happened?" "Fence line's been cut, deliberate, and there's men on your land moving cattle toward the property line." Evelyn's blood went cold. Caleb's face went hard as stone. "How many men?" "4 that I saw, could be more." Jack's eyes flicked to Evelyn. "They got a wagon. Look like they're planning to take the whole herd." Caleb was already moving, grabbing his rifle from the wall rack. "Get Miguel and Carlos. Tell them to arm up and meet me at the ridge." "Already done." "Good." Caleb turned to Evelyn. "Stay in the house. Lock the doors. Don't come out until I get back." "What's happening?" "Cattle thieves. Not the first time, won't be the last." He checked his rifle with practiced efficiency. "Usually they run when we show up, but I need you safe while we handle it." Evelyn grabbed his arm. "Be careful." He looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then met her eyes. "Always am." Then he was gone, riding hard toward the north pasture with Jack beside him. Evelyn stood in the barn doorway, watching them disappear over the rise, dread building in her chest. Mrs. Chen appeared at her elbow. "Come on, let's get inside." "What if something happens?" "Then standing out here worrying won't change it." Mrs. Chen's voice was firm, but not unkind. "Caleb knows what he's doing. He's dealt with thieves before." They went inside. Mrs. Chen locked the doors and checked the windows while Evelyn paced the kitchen like a caged animal. An hour passed, then 2. The waiting was torture. Finally, the sound of horses. Evelyn ran to the window to see Caleb and his men returning, driving a small group of cattle back toward the pasture. No wagon in sight. No strangers. She unlocked the door and met Caleb on the porch. He dismounted stiffly, favoring his left side. "You're hurt. Just bruised. One of them got a lucky hit before they ran." He touched her shoulder briefly, like he needed to confirm she was still there. "You okay?" "I'm fine. You're the one who got hit. I've had worse." He glanced back toward the north pasture. "They cut the fence in 3 places. Took about 20 head before we stopped them. Got most of the cattle back, but they'll try again." "Who were they?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Didn't get close enough for introductions, but I'd bet money Beckman sent them." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "Why would he—" "Because you're here instead of with him. Because I made him look weak by paying your father's debt first." Caleb's voice went cold. Men like Beckman don't forget slights. They just wait for opportunities to get even. This is my fault. No. He turned to her sharply. This is Beckman being exactly what I knew he was. A vindictive bastard who hurts people to feel powerful. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. Both of you inside. I need to look at those ribs. Caleb started to argue, but Mrs. Chen's expression brooked no disagreement. They went inside, and she made him sit while she examined the damage. His left side was already darkening with bruises. Cracked, maybe, she pronounced. Wrap it tight and don't do anything stupid for a week. I don't have a week. They'll be back. Then you'll deal with it carefully. Mrs. Chen started wrapping his ribs with practiced efficiency. You're no good to anyone dead. Evelyn watched from across the kitchen, her mind racing. This was because of her. Beckman was targeting Caleb because he'd protected her. The thought made her sick. I should leave, she said quietly. Both Caleb and Mrs. Chen looked at her. Absolutely not, Caleb said. If I'm gone, Beckman has no reason to... Beckman will find another reason. Caleb stood despite Mrs. Chen's protest, crossing to where Evelyn stood. You leave now, he wins, and I don't lose to men like him. This isn't about winning. It's about keeping you safe. Same goes for you. His eyes were fierce. I brought you here to protect you. That doesn't stop just because things get difficult. People could get hurt. You already got hurt. I've been hurt before. I'll heal. He reached out like he was going to touch her face, then caught himself and dropped his hand. Don't run because you're scared. Run if you genuinely want to leave. But not because of Beckman. Evelyn's throat felt tight. I don't want to leave. Then don't. The next few days were tense. Caleb doubled the guards on the property line and had his men patrol in shifts. Nothing happened, but the waiting felt worse than action. Everyone moved around the ranch with rifles close and eyes on the horizon. Evelyn tried to help where she could, cooking, mending, anything to feel useful. But mostly she worried, watching Caleb push himself too hard despite his cracked ribs, seeing the strain in his face when he thought no one was looking. On the 6th night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed listening to the house settle, her mind spinning through worst-case scenarios. Finally, she gave up and went downstairs for water. Caleb sat at the kitchen table in the dark, a glass of whiskey in front of him untouched. Can't sleep either? Evelyn asked. He looked up, shadows under his eyes. Too much to think about. She poured herself water and sat across from him. When's the last time you slept? Few days ago, maybe. Caleb, I know. He rubbed his face. I just keep running through scenarios, trying to figure out Beckman's next move. What if there isn't one? What if the cattle theft was all he wanted? It wasn't. Caleb's voice was certain. Men like him don't stop until they get what they want or something forces them to stop. So what do we do? We? He looked at her. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. He's coming after you because of me. That makes it my fight. Evelyn leaned forward. So what do we do? Caleb was quiet for a long moment, studying her face in the dim light. You really want to know what I think we should do? Yes. We wait. Let him make the next move, and when he does, we're ready. He paused. And you stay as far from the danger as possible. I'm not hiding while you risk yourself. Yes, you are. Because if something happens to me, you need to be safe enough to get away. His voice went hard. That's not negotiable, Evelyn. You don't get to decide that. I do when it's my ranch and my fight. They stared at each other, the tension thick enough to cut. Finally, Evelyn stood. Fine, but when this is over, we're having a long conversation about you making decisions for me without asking. A slight smile crossed Caleb's face. Fair enough. She started toward the stairs, then stopped. Caleb? Yeah? Come back alive. Whatever happens, just come back. His eyes softened. I will. She went back to bed, but sleep still didn't come. The attack came 3 days later, just before dawn. Evelyn woke to shouting and the sound of breaking glass. She bolted upright, heart hammering, and ran to the window. In the pre-dawn gray, she could see figures moving near the barn. Fire. Someone had set the barn on fire. She threw on clothes and ran downstairs. Mrs. Chen was already in the kitchen, fully dressed. Stay inside, the older woman ordered. What's happening? What does it look like? Beckman's making his move. Mrs. Chen handed her a rifle. You know how to use this? My father taught me, years ago. Good. Stay by the window. Shoot anyone who tries to get in that you don't recognize. Then she was gone, heading out the back door toward the fire. Evelyn moved to the front window, rifle in hand, watching the chaos unfold. Caleb and his men were fighting the fire, trying to save the horses trapped inside. She could see the animals screaming, see the flames climbing higher. Movement in the trees caught her eye. 3 men, creeping toward the house while everyone was distracted by the fire. Her blood went cold. She checked the rifle, loaded, and positioned herself by the door. The men got closer. Closer. One of them tried the front door handle. Evelyn fired through the door. The man yelped and stumbled back. His companions grabbed him and dragged him toward the trees, abandoning their approach. Her hands were shaking. She'd never shot at a person before. Never wanted to. But watching those men try to get into the house while Caleb fought the fire had flipped some switch inside her. This was her home now, and she'd defend it. The fire took an hour to contain. By the time the sun came up properly, the barn was half destroyed, but the horses were safe. Caleb stood in the wreckage, covered in soot and ash, staring at the damage with hard eyes. Evelyn walked out to meet him. He turned at the sound of her approach, and something in his expression cracked when he saw her. You're supposed to be inside. 3 men tried to get in the house. I shot at them. She held up the rifle. They ran. Caleb's eyes went wide. You what? I defended my home. The words came out steady. This is my home, Caleb. I'm not hiding while people try to take it from us. You could have been killed. So could you. But here we both are. She gestured at the barn. How bad is it? Bad enough. We'll need to rebuild. He looked back at the smoking structure. This was a message. Beckman wants me to know he can reach anything on this ranch, including you. Then we send a message back. What kind of message? Evelyn's jaw set. That we don't scare easy. That he picked the wrong people to intimidate. Something like pride crossed Caleb's face. You're sure about this? About staying? Because it's going to get worse before it gets better. I'm sure. She stepped closer to him. I told you. This is my home now. I'm not giving it up without a fight. Caleb reached out and cupped her face with one ash-stained hand. You're either very brave or very stupid. Maybe both. She leaned into his touch without thinking. But I'm here. And I'm staying. He looked at her like he wanted to say something, but Jack's voice interrupted. Caleb, found something you need to see. They walked over to where Jack stood near the tree line. He pointed at the ground, hoofprints clear in the mud. And something else. A piece of paper nailed to a tree. Caleb pulled it down and read it, his face going still. What does it say? Evelyn asked. He handed it to her without a word. The message was written in rough block letters. The girl or the ranch? You don't get both. Evelyn's hands trembled as she held the paper. He's giving you an ultimatum. He's trying to. Caleb took the note back and tore it in half. Doesn't mean I'm taking it. Caleb, if keeping me here means losing everything you've built, I'm not choosing. His voice was flat. I'm not giving him the satisfaction, and I'm sure as hell not handing you over to that bastard. So what do? We fight. He looked at his men gathered around. We prepare, and we make damn sure Beckman regrets ever threatening what's mine. The next week was a flurry of preparation. Caleb sent Miguel to Guthrie to wire the territorial marshal about the attacks. Carlos and Jack reinforced the fences and set up watch points around the property. Mrs. Chen stockpiled supplies and made sure the root cellar could serve as a shelter if needed, and Evelyn learned to shoot properly. Caleb took her out to the back pasture every afternoon and taught her how to handle the rifle with real skill, not just panic. How to breathe and aim, how to compensate for wind and distance, how to reload quickly under pressure. You're a natural, he said on the 4th day, watching her hit the target 3 times in a row. My father taught me the basics. You're teaching me the rest. She lowered the rifle. Why didn't you do this when I first arrived? Didn't want to scare you. Didn't want you to think you needed to fight to earn your place here. He stepped closer. But circumstances change. Do you regret it? Bringing me here? If you just paid the debt anonymously like I suggested, no. The word was immediate and certain. I don't regret it, not for a second. Even though it might cost you everything? You're part of everything now. He said it simply, like it was obvious. Losing you would cost more than losing the ranch. Evelyn's breath caught. Caleb. A rider appeared on the horizon, moving fast. They both turned to watch as the figure got closer. Not one of Caleb's men, someone else. The rider pulled up in a cloud of dust, a territorial marshal, badge gleaming on his vest. Caleb Grayson? That's me? The marshal dismounted. Got your wire about Harold Beckman. Come to ask some questions and see the damage. Hope flickered in Evelyn's chest. Maybe the law could actually help. They spent the next 2 hours showing the marshal everything, the cut fences, the burned barn, the threatening note. The marshal took notes and nodded a lot, but said very little. Finally, he closed his notebook. Here's the thing. You got damage and threats, but no proof Beckman was involved. Who else would it be? Caleb demanded. Could be anyone. Cattle thieves? Drifters? Someone with an unrelated grudge. The marshal held up a hand against Caleb's protest. I'm not saying it wasn't him. I'm saying I can't arrest a man on suspicion. I need evidence. So we're supposed to just wait until he kills someone? I'm saying be careful. Document everything. If you can catch one of his men in the act and they'll testify. The marshal shrugged. Then we got a case. He left an hour later, and Evelyn watched Caleb's shoulders sag with frustration. The law's useless, he said bitterly. Not useless, just limited. Evelyn touched his arm. We'll figure something else out. Like what? She didn't have an answer. That night, Evelyn sat in the parlor trying to read while Caleb worked in his office. She couldn't concentrate. Her mind kept circling back to Beckman's ultimatum, to the marshal's useless visit, to the way Caleb had said losing her would cost more than losing the ranch. She set down her book and walked to the office. Caleb sat at his desk, maps and papers spread out, trying to find some solution she knew didn't exist. You should rest, she said from the doorway. He looked up, exhaustion evident in every line of his face. Can't. Too much to figure out. Caleb, you can't solve this tonight. You need sleep. I need to keep you safe. I am safe. I'm right here. She moved into the room. And you're going to make yourself sick if you don't rest. He leaned back in his chair. You ever feel like the harder you try to do right by someone, the worse things get? Every day of my life until I came here. That surprised a tired smile out of him. Fair point. Evelyn perched on the edge of his desk. Can I ask you something? Always. Why me? Really? I know what you said about the market, about my father's cruelty, but there were probably 100 women in worse situations. Why did you remember me specifically? Caleb was quiet for a long time, his eyes distant. You want the honest answer? Please. You smiled at something in that book while your father was screaming at you. I watched you shut out the world and just exist somewhere else for a minute, somewhere safe, and I thought... He stopped, his voice rough. I thought that if I ever got the chance to give you somewhere safe for real, not just in a book, I would. Evelyn's eyes burned. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I know. It's also the most decent thing anyone's ever done for me. Caleb stood and moved closer, close enough she could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes. I meant what I said earlier. You're part of this place now, part of my life. And I don't regret it, even if it costs you everything. Even then. He reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his hand lingering. You're worth fighting for, Evelyn Mercer. I just wish you believed that. I'm starting to. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. They stood there in the quiet office, the space between them charged with all the words they hadn't said. Caleb's thumb brushed her cheek and Evelyn's breath caught. We should, he started. A crash outside, breaking glass, shouting. They both ran to the window, fire again this time at the equipment shed, and figures moving in the darkness, more than before. Caleb grabbed his rifle. Get to the cellar, now. No. Evelyn? I told you. I'm not hiding. She picked up her own rifle. We fight together or not at all? He looked at her for one long moment, then nodded. Stay behind me, and for the love of heaven, don't do anything heroic. They ran outside into chaos. The fight was brutal and brief. Caleb's men emerged from their positions and drove the attackers back, but not before one of the barns took serious damage. Miguel caught a knife to the arm. Jack took a blow to the head that left him dizzy. And Evelyn came face to face with one of Beckman's men trying to light the main house on fire. She didn't think, just raised her rifle and fired. The man fell, clutching his leg, the torch dropping from his hand. Evelyn kicked it away and pointed the rifle at his chest. "Move and I shoot again. Higher." The man's eyes went wide. "You're crazy." "I'm protective. There's a difference." She kept the rifle steady even though her hands wanted to shake. "Who sent you?" "I ain't saying nothing." "Then you can explain it to the marshal when he comes back." She raised her voice. "Caleb, I got one." Caleb appeared with Jack right behind him. They tied up Beckman's man while the others fled into the darkness. When it was over, they had one prisoner, 2 damaged buildings, and 3 injured ranch hands. But they had evidence. Finally, the prisoner talked before the marshal even arrived the next day. Turned out loyalty only went so far when faced with a long jail sentence. He confirmed everything. Beckman had sent them, paid them to harass Caleb until he gave up the girl or the ranch. The marshal arrested Beckman that same afternoon. When Caleb got the news, he found Evelyn in the kitchen helping Mrs. Chen prepare dinner. "It's over," he said simply. "Beckman's in custody. The attacks will stop." Evelyn set down the knife she'd been using. "It's really over?" "Yeah." She should have felt relief, should have felt safe. Instead, she felt shaky and strange, like all the fear she'd been holding back suddenly had nowhere to go. "Evelyn?" Caleb stepped closer. "You all right?" "I shot someone." The words came out hollow. "I pointed a gun at a man and pulled the trigger." "You protected your home." "I know, but I still—" Her hands started trembling. "I was so angry, so scared, and I didn't even hesitate." Caleb took her hands in his. "You did what you had to do. That's not something to be ashamed of." "I'm not ashamed. I'm just—" She looked up at him. "I'm different than I was when I got here, and I don't know if that's good or bad." "It's good." His voice was gentle. "You're stronger, braver. You've stopped waiting for permission to exist and started claiming your own space." He squeezed her hands. "That's not bad, Evelyn. That's survival." She wanted to believe him, wanted to feel proud of who she was becoming instead of scared of it. Mrs. Chen cleared her throat. "I'm going to check on the men. You two talk." She left, giving them privacy. Evelyn pulled her hands from Caleb's and wrapped her arms around herself. "What happens now?" "We rebuild, fix the damage, go back to normal." "Is there a normal for us?" Caleb was quiet. "I don't know." "What do you want there to be?" Evelyn turned to face him fully. "I want to stop being afraid. I want to stop questioning every kind thing you do. I want to believe this is real." "It is real." "Then prove it." The words came out before she could stop them. "Tell me what you want, not what you think I want to hear, what you actually want." Caleb's jaw worked. "You sure you want that answer?" "Yes. I want you to stay, not as a guest or someone I'm protecting, as someone who belongs here because this is home." He stepped closer. "I want to wake up knowing you're down the hall. I want to teach you to run this ranch because it'll be yours someday too. I want—" He stopped, his voice going rough. "I want you to look at me the way you did in my office last night. Like maybe I'm not just the man who paid your father's debt. Like maybe I'm someone you could what? Care about. The way I care about you." The kitchen felt too small suddenly, too warm. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs. "I already do," she whispered. "Care about you. That's why I'm so scared." "Scared of what?" "Of losing this. Of it being too good to last. Of you waking up one day and realizing I'm not worth all the trouble I've caused." Caleb closed the distance between them and cupped her face in both hands. "Listen to me. You're worth every burned barn, every sleepless night, every fight with Beckman and anyone else who comes after you. You're worth it because you're you. Because you're brave and stubborn and you stood in my kitchen and threatened to burn down my ranch if I lied to you." Despite everything, Evelyn laughed. "That was a good threat. It was an excellent threat." His thumb brushed her cheek. "Stay, please. Not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to be here." I do want to be here. She reached up and covered his hands with hers. I want to stay and learn this ranch and figure out who I am when I'm not afraid all the time. And us? I want there to be an us. I need time to believe it's real. Take all the time you need. Caleb leaned his forehead against hers. I've waited 7 years. I can wait a little longer. They stood there in the warm kitchen, holding on to each other while the ranch settled into evening quiet around them. And for the first time since arriving, Evelyn let herself believe that maybe, possibly, this could actually work. That maybe the girl in the book had it wrong. Maybe freedom wasn't just about being alone. Maybe it was about choosing who you let close enough to matter. And maybe she'd already made that choice without realizing it. The weeks after Beckman's arrest should have been peaceful. The attacks stopped. The ranch settled back into its rhythms. Caleb's men rebuilt the damaged structures with quiet efficiency, and life moved forward the way it was supposed to. But Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that something else was coming. She tried to ignore it, tried to focus on the good things, learning to manage the household accounts with Mrs. Chen, helping with the horses, spending evenings on the porch with Caleb talking about everything and nothing. They were building something together, slow and careful, and she didn't want to ruin it with paranoia. Then Violet showed up again. It was a Tuesday morning, crisp and clear, when the wagon appeared on the road. Evelyn was hanging laundry and saw it coming from a distance. Her stomach dropped. Mrs. Chen, she called toward the house. We have company. The older woman emerged, took one look at the approaching wagon, and frowned. That the sister? Yeah. Want me to send her away? Evelyn considered it, but curiosity won over caution. No, let's see what she wants this time. Violet stepped down from the wagon looking less put together than before. Her dress was expensive but wrinkled. Her hair pinned up but not perfectly, and there were shadows under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Evelyn, she said, her voice tight. I need to talk to you. Last time you were here, you tried to drag me home. Why should I listen now? Because everything's fallen apart. Violet's composure cracked slightly. Please, just 5 minutes. Evelyn glanced at Mrs. Chen, who shrugged. Against her better judgment, she nodded toward the porch. 5 minutes. Out here where everyone can see us. They sat on the porch steps, not quite touching, years of complicated history between them. Papa's in jail, Violet said without preamble. Evelyn's breath caught. What? 3 weeks after Beckman's arrest. Turns out the debt he owed you, the one Mr. Grayson paid, wasn't the only one. He borrowed from the wrong people. When he couldn't pay, they had him arrested for fraud. How much does he owe? 30,000. Maybe more. The lawyers aren't even sure. Violet's hands twisted in her lap. Mother and I lost the house. Everything. We're living with her sister in a 2-room apartment in Guthrie. Evelyn should have felt satisfaction. Should have felt like justice had finally caught up with her father. Instead, she just felt tired. I'm sorry, she said, and meant it. Violet looked at her sharply. Are you? After everything he did to you? He's still my father, and you're still my sister, even if we were never very good at it. Evelyn sighed. What do you want from me, Violet? I don't have money. I can't help him. I don't want you to help him. Violet's voice went quiet. I want you to help me. How? There's a man, a lawyer from back east. He's offered to settle Papa's debts and take care of Mother and me in exchange for... She stopped. In exchange for what? Violet met her eyes. Marriage. To me. He's older, established, not terrible to look at. He could give me security, a future. Then what's the problem? The problem is he came to see Papa in jail last week. And while he was there, he saw the original debt papers, the ones involving you and Mr. Grayson. Violet's jaw tightened. He's claiming the agreement is invalid, that since Papa was in debt when he signed those papers, he didn't have the legal right to transfer you to anyone. Everything should be void. Evelyn's blood went cold. What does that mean? It means this lawyer, his name is Whitmore, thinks he can undo the whole arrangement, claim you were transferred illegally, force you back under Papa's authority so he can settle the matter properly. Violet's voice shook. Evelyn, he's not doing this out of legal principle. He's doing it because he wants leverage. If he can prove the transfer was illegal, he can force Mr. Grayson to pay him to make the problem go away, And if Grayson refuses, he gets me back. Evelyn's hands clenched. He uses me as a bargaining chip to squeeze money out of Caleb. Yes. Violet looked miserable. I told him to drop it. Told him you were fine and the whole thing should stay buried. But he won't listen. He's filed paperwork with the territorial court. There's going to be a hearing. When? 2 weeks. In Guthrie. Violet grabbed Evelyn's hand. I came to warn you and to tell you I'm not marrying him. I'd rather be poor and free than comfortable and complicit in this. Evelyn stared at her stepsister, seeing her clearly for maybe the first time. Violet wasn't the enemy. Never had been. They'd both just been trying to survive the same terrible situation in different ways. Thank you, Evelyn said quietly, for warning me, and for choosing better than Papa did. What are you going to do? I don't know yet, but I'm not running. Evelyn stood. This is my home now, and if some Eastern lawyer thinks he can use me to extort the man, She stopped, the words catching in her throat. Violet smiled slightly. The man you love. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Violet stood as well. For what it's worth, I think Mr. Grayson is good for you. You look different, stronger, like you finally figured out you're allowed to take up space. I'm still figuring that out. We all are. Violet moved toward her wagon, then paused. If you need anything for the hearing, testimony, documents, anything, let me know. I'll help however I can. She left, and Evelyn stood on the porch trying to process everything. The peaceful weeks she'd been enjoying were over. The fight wasn't finished, after all. Caleb found her there an hour later, staring at nothing. Violet was here, he said. It wasn't a question. How'd you know? Jack saw the wagon, said you looked upset. He sat beside her on the steps. What happened? Evelyn told him everything, watched his face go progressively harder as she explained about the lawyer, the hearing, the claim that their agreement was invalid. When she finished, Caleb was silent for a long moment. This is Beckman's revenge, he said finally. Can't get to you directly anymore, so he found another way. I'd bet money he's the one who pointed Whitmore toward those papers. Can he actually win? Can they really undo everything? I don't know. The law out here is... Caleb stopped, frustration evident. Complicated. Territorial courts make up half the rules as they go. If Whitmore's got a good argument and the right judge, I could end up back under my father's authority. Over my dead body. Caleb, I mean it. He turned to face her fully. I don't care what some court says. You're not going back. Not to your father. Not to anyone. I'll fight this with every resource I have. What if fighting makes it worse? What if they use it against you? Then they use it against me. I can handle it. His voice softened. But I won't let them take you. That's not negotiable. Evelyn wanted to argue, wanted to tell him not to risk everything for her. But looking at his determined face, she knew it wouldn't matter. Caleb Grayson had decided to protect her, and nothing was going to change his mind. We need a lawyer, she said instead. A good one. I know someone in Guthrie. Handled the land disputes when I was building this place. He's smart, and he doesn't lose often. Caleb stood. I'll ride out tomorrow, talk to him, see what our options are. I'm coming with you. Evelyn, this is about me. I'm not sitting here waiting to hear my fate secondhand. She stood to face him. I'm coming. Don't argue. That almost smile crossed his face. Wouldn't dream of it. They rode out the next morning, leaving Mrs. Chen in charge of the ranch. The trip to Guthrie took most of the day, and they arrived as the sun was setting, painting the rough frontier town in shades of gold and amber. Caleb's lawyer, a sharp-eyed man named Morrison, listened to their story with increasing interest. Whitmore's argument has merit, he said when they finished. Not a lot, but some. The question of whether your father had the legal right to transfer custody while in debt himself is murky. Territorial law doesn't address it clearly. So we could lose, Evelyn said. You could. But here's the thing. Whitmore's not actually trying to win. He's trying to create enough legal confusion to force a settlement. Morrison leaned back in his chair. He wants Grayson to pay him to drop the case. Classic extortion dressed up in legal language. What if we don't settle? Caleb asked. Then we go to court and argue that the debt transfer was legitimate, that Evelyn's been living independently on your ranch for months now, and that she's of legal age to make her own decisions regardless of what her father signed. Morrison paused. But there's a risk. What risk? If we lose, the court could rule that Evelyn needs to return to her father's custody until the matter is properly resolved, which means she'd be vulnerable to whatever arrangement Whitmore or your father cook up next. Evelyn's hands went cold. So our options are pay off the extortionist or risk me ending up right back where I started. Essentially, yes. Morrison looked sympathetic. Unless we can find a third option. Like what? Caleb demanded. Morrison was quiet for a moment, considering. There is one way to make this entire case irrelevant. One way to ensure no court can force Evelyn back under her father's authority. What way? Marriage. Morrison said it simply. If Evelyn's married, her legal status changes completely. She's no longer under her father's authority regardless of what any debt papers say. The case becomes moot. The office went very quiet. Evelyn's heart hammered. That's not a real solution. That's just trading one cage for another. Not if it's a legitimate marriage between consenting adults, Morrison countered. You'd have legal protection, autonomy, and the ability to make your own decisions. Your father would have no claim on you whatsoever. You're suggesting I marry Caleb to avoid a court case. I'm suggesting you marry someone you trust to give you the legal protection you need while you wait for your father's debts to be settled and Whitmore to lose interest. Morrison looked between them. Whether that's Grayson or someone else is your choice. Evelyn stood abruptly. I need air. She left the office and walked out into the darkening street, her mind spinning. Marriage. The thing she'd spent her whole life dreading because it meant giving up what little control she had, and now it was being presented as her best option for freedom. The irony was almost funny. Caleb found her sitting on a bench outside the hotel, staring at nothing. You okay? He asked quietly. Morrison wants me to marry you to avoid going to court. I know. That's insane. Yeah, Caleb sat beside her. It is. They sat in silence for a while, watching Guthrie settle into evening. Finally, Evelyn spoke. Would you do it, if I asked? Caleb looked at her. Marry you to protect you from a legal case? Yes. In a heartbeat. He said it without hesitation. But not because Morrison suggested it, and not because it's convenient. Only if it's what you actually want. How am I supposed to know what I want when everything's happening so fast? Then we slow it down. Caleb's voice was steady. We tell Morrison we need time to think. We explore every other option. We don't make any decisions while we're backed into a corner. Evelyn wanted to agree, wanted to take the time to think it through rationally. But a part of her, the part that had watched Caleb fight for her, protect her, wait patiently while she learned to trust him, already knew what she wanted. She just wasn't sure she was brave enough to admit it. They spent the night at the hotel, separate rooms, Caleb insisted, despite Evelyn's weak protest that they should save money. In the morning, they met with Morrison again. We're not settling, Caleb said firmly, and we're not making any hasty decisions about marriage. What other options do we have? Morrison spread out papers on his desk. We fight it in court. I'll argue that the debt transfer was legitimate under the circumstances, that Evelyn's been living independently and is clearly capable of making her own decisions, and that Whitmore's case is nothing but veiled extortion. What are our chances? 60-40 in our favor, maybe 65 if I can get Judge Hammond instead of Judge Peters. Hammond's sympathetic to women's autonomy. Peters is old-fashioned. And if we lose, then we appeal. Take it to the territorial Supreme Court if we have to. But that could take months, and in the meantime, Morrison looked at Evelyn. You'd be in legal limbo, possibly required to return to your father until the appeal is heard. No, Caleb's voice was flat. That's not happening. Then you need to give me something to work with, some argument that makes Evelyn's independence ironclad. Morrison leaned forward. The marriage option does that, but if you're refusing it, I need another angle. Evelyn's mind raced. There had to be something, some way to prove she was her own person without having to marry anyone. What if I had income? She asked suddenly. What if I could prove I'm self-supporting? Morrison considered. It would help. If you could show the court you've been earning wages, supporting yourself independently, I haven't been earning wages. I've been living at Caleb's ranch. So we changed that. Caleb turned to her. Starting today, you're on the ranch payroll. Official employee with documented wages. We backdate it to when you arrived if we have to. That's fraud, Morrison warned. It's correcting an oversight. Caleb's jaw set. I should have put her on payroll from the start. My mistake. We're fixing it now. Morrison sighed. It's thin, but it might work. Combined with testimony about your living situation, your clear desire to remain independent. He nodded. We can build a case around it. Not perfect, but better than nothing. They spent the rest of the morning working out details. By the time they left Morrison's office, Evelyn had a contract declaring her an employee of Grayson Ranch, a documented wage that seemed absurdly generous for the work she actually did, and a growing headache. On the ride back to the ranch, Caleb was unusually quiet. You okay? Evelyn asked. Just thinking. About? About how we're building a legal case around you being my employee when what I actually want... He stopped. What do you actually want? Caleb pulled his horse to a stop. Evelyn did the same, and they sat there in the middle of the empty road while the sun beat down on them. I want what Morrison suggested, Caleb admitted. Not because it's legally convenient, because I want you to be my wife. Because I'm tired of pretending this is just about protection or debt or giving you a safe place to land. His gray eyes were intense. I want you, Evelyn. All of you. For real. Forever. Evelyn's breath caught. Caleb, but I won't ask. Not while you're backed into a corner by lawyers and court cases. Not while you could mistake a proposal for more manipulation. He urged his horse forward again. So we'll fight this your way. Prove your independence in court, and when it's over, when you're free and clear, and you know I'm not trying to trap you, he glanced back at her. Then maybe we'll talk about what comes next. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but Evelyn's mind wouldn't shut up. Because Caleb was wrong about one thing. She didn't feel backed into a corner. She felt like she was finally seeing clearly for the first time in her life. And what she saw was a man who loved her enough to wait until she was certain. Who'd rather fight a legal battle than ask her to marry him under duress. Who put her freedom above his own wants every single time. The question wasn't whether she wanted to marry him. The question was whether she was brave enough to choose it herself instead of having it chosen for her. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. In the meantime, life at the ranch developed an edge of tension that no one could quite shake. Caleb worked on preparing their case with Morrison. Evelyn practiced her testimony and tried not to panic. Mrs. Chen cooked nervous energy into elaborate meals no one had appetite for. 5 days before the hearing, a telegram arrived from Violet. Whitmore escalating, stop. Bringing additional witnesses, stop. Be careful, stop. Evelyn showed it to Caleb, who swore under his breath. What kind of witnesses? Probably people who'll testify I'm a manipulative bastard who coerced you into staying here, Caleb said grimly. Or that you're not capable of making your own decisions. Classic character assassination. Can they do that? They can try. Whether the judge allows it depends on Hammond's mood. He crumpled the telegram. We need our own witnesses, people who can testify you've been living here voluntarily, making your own choices, clearly independent. Like who? Mrs. Chen, Jack, the ranch hands? Caleb paused. And Violet, if she's willing. The idea of Violet testifying on her behalf felt strange, but Evelyn wrote back immediately, asking if she'd be willing to appear in court. The response came the next day. Of course, stop, we'll tell truth. Stop, you deserve better than this, stop. 2 days before the hearing, Morrison arrived at the ranch to prep them. Whitmore's bringing 3 witnesses, he said, spreading papers across the kitchen table. Your father, your stepmother, and a doctor who will testify about women's fragile mental states and susceptibility to manipulation. That's garbage, Evelyn said flatly. I know, but it plays well with traditional judges. We need to counter it. Morrison looked at her seriously. How are you with public speaking? I've never done it. You're about to learn. Because the best witness we have is you. If you can stand up in that courtroom and clearly, calmly explain your situation, your choice to stay here, your work on the ranch, your independence, it'll undermine everything Whitmore's trying to claim. Evelyn's stomach churned. What if I mess up? Then I'll redirect. But you won't mess up. Morrison's voice was confident. You've survived worse than a lawyer asking questions. You can handle this. They spent the next day practicing. Morrison fired questions at her while Caleb and Mrs. Chen watched, and Evelyn learned to answer clearly without getting defensive or emotional. It was exhausting. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, mind racing through everything that could go wrong. The judge could side with Whitmore, could declare her legally incompetent, could force her back to her father, could... A soft knock on her door. "Evelyn? You awake?" Caleb's voice. She got up and unlocked the door. He stood there in the dim hallway, fully dressed, looking as sleepless as she felt. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Keep running through worst-case scenarios." "Same." She stepped back. "You want to come in?" He hesitated, then nodded and entered her room. They sat on the edge of her bed, shoulders touching, both staring at nothing. "I'm scared," Evelyn admitted. "Me too." "What if we lose?" "We won't." "But if we do, then we run." Caleb said it simply. "Pack up, head west, start over somewhere they can't find us. I've got money saved, contacts in California. We could disappear if we had to." Evelyn looked at him. "You'd give up your ranch? Everything you built?" "In a heartbeat." He met her eyes. "None of it matters if you're not here. I built this place to survive losing Sarah. But you..." His voice went rough. "Losing you would break me in a way I wouldn't recover from." Evelyn's eyes burned. "Caleb, I love you." He said it quietly, like he'd been holding it back for months and couldn't anymore. "I've loved you since you stood in my kitchen and threatened to burn down my ranch. Maybe longer. And I know this is terrible timing and you've got a court case to worry about, but I needed you to know, before tomorrow, before anything else happens. I love you, Evelyn Mercer. And whatever that judge decides, it doesn't change how I feel." Evelyn couldn't breathe, couldn't think, could only feel the weight of his words settling around her like armor. "Say something," Caleb said when she stayed silent. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to be loved. No one's ever..." Her voice broke. "I don't know how to believe it's real." "Then let me prove it." He took her hand. "Every day, for as long as you'll let me. I'll prove it's real." She looked at their joined hands, at this man who'd upended his entire life to protect her, and felt something crack open in her chest. All the fear, all the doubt, all the years of learning that love was conditional and temporary and always came with a price. None of that was true with Caleb. He'd proven it over and over, and she'd been too scared to admit what she felt in return. "I love you too," she said, the words feeling both terrifying and right. "I think I have for weeks. I was just too afraid to admit it." Caleb's expression transformed. "Yeah? Yeah." She squeezed his hand. "So if we lose tomorrow, we run together, and if we win, when we win," he corrected, "when we win, we figure out what comes next, together." He pulled her into his arms, and Evelyn let herself be held, let herself feel safe for the first time since Violet's warning telegram. Whatever happened tomorrow, they'd face it together. That had to count for something. They stayed like that for a long time, not talking, just existing in the same space. Eventually, Caleb kissed her forehead and stood. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day." "Caleb?" She caught his hand. "Thank you for everything." "Nothing to thank me for. I'm just doing what I should have done 7 years ago." "What's that?" "Choosing you." He left and Evelyn lay back down, his words echoing in her head. For the first time in days, sleep came easy. The morning of the hearing dawned clear and cold. They dressed in their best clothes, Evelyn in a simple blue dress Mrs. Chen had altered to fit perfectly, Caleb in a suit that made him look uncomfortable but respectable. The ride to Guthrie was tense and quiet. The courthouse was already crowded when they arrived. Evelyn saw her father first, looking thinner and grayer than she remembered. Margaret stood beside him, blank-faced as always. And there was Whitmore, tall, polished, radiating the kind of confidence that came from years of winning. Violet stood off to the side, and when she saw Evelyn, she crossed over immediately. "You ready?" she asked. "No, but I'm here anyway." "That's all that matters." Violet squeezed her hand. "You're stronger than any of them know. Show them." Morrison appeared and guided them into the courtroom. Judge Hammond presided, a stern-faced woman in her 50s, which Evelyn took as a good sign. At least it wasn't Peter's. The hearing began with Whitmore's opening statement. He painted Evelyn as a naive young woman manipulated by a wealthy rancher into an inappropriate living situation, claimed the debt transfer was illegal, and argued that she needed to be returned to her father's protection until proper arrangements could be made. It was infuriating. But Evelyn sat still and kept her face neutral, the way Morrison had taught her. Then Morrison gave their side. He described Evelyn's situation before coming to the ranch. The gambling debt, Beckman's threat, her father's willingness to sell her. He explained the debt transfer, Caleb's protection, and Evelyn's clear choice to stay. He emphasized her work on the ranch, her wages, her independence. Then came the witnesses. Her father testified first, claiming he'd been pressured into signing the papers, that he regretted letting his daughter go. It was all lies, and Evelyn's hands clenched under the table. Margaret testified that Evelyn had always been difficult and easily influenced. More lies. The doctor testified about women's delicate constitutions and their need for male guidance. Evelyn wanted to scream. Then it was their turn. Mrs. Chen testified about Evelyn's work ethic, her independence, her clear desire to remain at the ranch. Jack testified about her contributions to the property, her bravery during Beckman's attacks. Miguel mentioned how she'd shot one of the attackers to protect the house. Then Violet took the stand. "Tell us about your relationship with your stepsister," Morrison said. "Complicated," Violet admitted. "We were never close. Our parents married out of convenience, not love, and Evelyn got the worst of it. My mother treated her terribly. Her father ignored her unless he needed something." "And the debt Mr. Grayson paid?" "It was real, and my father was absolutely going to hand Evelyn over to Harold Beckman if Mr. Grayson hadn't intervened." Violet's voice was clear. "Beckman is a monster. Everyone knows it. Evelyn would have been destroyed within months." "So you believe Mr. Grayson's actions were protective, not predatory?" "I believe he saved my sister's life." Violet looked directly at the judge. "And I believe she has every right to choose where she lives and who she trusts. She's not a child or an incompetent. She's a grown woman who's been making her own decisions for months. The fact that we're all sitting here debating her capacity to do so is insulting." Whitmore objected, but Judge Hammond overruled him. Finally, Morrison called Evelyn to the stand. She walked up with her heart hammering, very aware of everyone watching. Caleb gave her an encouraging nod from his seat. Morrison started gently. "Miss Mercer, tell us in your own words why you chose to go with Mr. Grayson." Evelyn took a breath. "Because staying meant being sold to Harold Beckman, and I'd rather take my chances with a stranger than guarantee my own destruction." "And when you arrived at the ranch?" "Mr. Grayson gave me a room with a lock, gave me the only key, told me I could leave whenever I wanted." She looked at the judge. "He kept his word. Every promise he made, he kept. That's more than I can say for most men I've known." Morrison walked her through her months at the ranch, the work she did, the wages she earned, the community she'd built. Evelyn answered clearly, honestly, without embellishment. Then Whitmore cross-examined. "Miss Mercer, you claim Mr. Grayson has been nothing but respectful, yet you live in his house unchaperoned. Isn't that—" "Mrs. Chen lives there too," Evelyn interrupted, "as do several ranch hands. I'm hardly unchaperoned." "But you share meals with Mr. Grayson, work alongside him, spend significant time alone in his company." "I do, because he's teaching me to run a ranch. That requires conversation." "Some might say it requires more than conversation." Whitmore's tone was insinuating. Morrison objected. Judge Hammond sustained it. Whitmore tried another angle. "You say you're employed at the ranch, but isn't it true you only started receiving wages recently, after this case was filed?" "The wages were backdated to reflect work I'd already done," Evelyn said carefully. "An oversight that Mr. Grayson corrected. Convenient timing." "Overdue correction," she countered. Whitmore pressed harder, trying to paint her as naive or manipulated, but Evelyn held her ground, answering each question with the same clear honesty Morrison had coached her on. Finally, he asked the question she'd been dreading. "Miss Mercer, if the court rules that you must return to your father's custody, will you comply?" The courtroom went silent. Evelyn looked at her father, at Margaret, at Whitmore's smug expression. Then she looked at Caleb. "No," she said clearly, "I won't. Murmurs rippled through the room. You'd defy a court order? Whitmore pressed. I'd refuse to be property. Evelyn's voice strengthened. I'm 22 years old. I've been supporting myself, making my own decisions, living independently for months. And if this court decides I'm too incompetent to do that, if you rule that I need to be handed back to a man who gambled me away like a poker chip, then no, I won't comply. I'll leave Oklahoma Territory before I let that happen. Judge Hammond leaned forward. Miss Mercer, you understand that's contempt of court? I understand it's survival, Your Honor, and I'm done choosing compliance over survival. The judge studied her for a long moment, then nodded to Morrison. Redirect? Morrison asked one final question. Miss Mercer, why do you want to stay at Grayson Ranch? Evelyn could have given the practiced answer about employment and independence. Instead, she told the truth. Because it's the first place I've ever felt like a person instead of a burden. Because Caleb Grayson sees me as someone worth protecting without demanding I diminish myself in return. Because I've built a life there that's mine. She paused. And because I love him, and he loves me, and we deserve the chance to figure out what that means without lawyers and judges and extortionists deciding our future for us. The courtroom erupted. Judge Hammond banged her gavel, calling for order. Whitmore stood. Your Honor, this just proves... Sit down, Mr. Whitmore. Hammond's voice was sharp. I've heard enough. She stood, and everyone fell silent. I'll issue my ruling tomorrow morning. Court is adjourned. She left, and Evelyn sagged in her chair, exhausted. Caleb was there immediately, pulling her into his arms. You were perfect, he murmured against her hair. I just told a judge I'd defy her ruling. You were still perfect. They left the courthouse to find a crowd waiting. Mrs. Chen, Jack, Miguel, even some townspeople who'd heard about the case. Violet pushed through and hugged Evelyn tightly. You were so brave, she whispered, or so stupid. We'll find out tomorrow. They spent that night at the hotel again, but Evelyn couldn't stand being alone. She knocked on Caleb's door around midnight, and he answered immediately, unsurprised. Can't sleep? He asked. Can't stop thinking. He pulled her inside, and they lay on his bed fully clothed, just holding each other while the night stretched on. Whatever happens tomorrow, said Evelyn started. We'll handle it, Caleb finished, together. Together, she agreed. And for the first time since this whole mess started, Evelyn actually believed they would. You said, Part 5, lưu ý. Viết 6.000 đến 6.500 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện. Pha hối thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Part 5, lưu ý. Viết 6.000 đến 6.500 từ liên kết liền mạch với các phần trước trong câu chuyện. Pha hồi thoại tạo thành một câu chuyện liền mạch khi ghép lại. Mỗi phần liền mạch với phần trước, không giới thiệu lại câu chuyện ở đầu phần mới. Liên kết các phần của câu chuyện một cách liền mạch. Sử dụng câu chuyện tiếp giữa các phần. Duy trì chủ đề, tránh ngắt quãng đột ngột, không sử dụng gạch đầu dòng hoặc tiêu đề phụ. Phong cách kể chuyện Mỹ, Hoa Kỳ, giống văn giàu cảm xúc. Kể theo ngôi thứ 3. Giữ đồ kịch tính không viết lan man, có quan điểm cá nhân, thông điệp, bài học, góc nhìn con người. Nhân vật không hoàn hảo, hội thoại tự nhiên, tránh ngôn ngữ văn chương sáo rơi và cụm từ AI điển hình. Viết như nhà văn chuyên nghiệp, không như AI cố gắng nghe sang. Có yếu tố con người, cầm miêu tả qua mượt mà và hoàn hảo. Phần 5 giải quyết hết vấn đề và kết thúc trọn vẹn câu chuyện. Câu chuyện không nhắc đến Chúa. Lưu ý trả lời trong mục tin nhắn không nhảy sang document. Chi đàn bắt buộc, không được xuất hiện trong nội dung truyền. Đây là một câu chuyện điện ảnh hoàn toàn hư cấu được tạo ra chỉ nhằm mục đích giải trí. Không đề cập hay ngụ ý rằng nó dựa trên sự kiện có thật, người thật hoặc câu chuyện có thật. Không sử dụng các cụm từ như dựa trên một câu chuyện có thật, theo ghi chép hoặc bất cứ điều gì tương tự. Tất cả các nhân vật, địa điểm, tổ chức và sự kiện phải hoàn toàn hư cấu. Show or 1456? Claude responded, Part 5. Part 5. Morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. Evelyn woke still dressed, still in Caleb's arms, with dawn light creeping through the hotel curtains. He was already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What time is it? She asked. Early. We don't have to be at the courthouse for another 2 hours. She should get up, should go back to her own room and make herself presentable. But the thought of leaving this small pocket of safety made her chest tight. I keep thinking about what happens if we lose, she admitted. We run. Like I said. You'd really give up everything? Caleb's hand traced slow circles on her back. I told you, none of it matters without you. The ranch, the cattle, all of it. I built it to survive. But you make me want to actually live again. That's worth more than land. Evelyn pressed her face against his shoulder. I'm terrified I'm going to ruin your life. Too late. You already ruined it. His voice was gentle. Ruined it for anyone else. Ruined my ability to be alone without feeling empty. Ruined my careful plans to just work until I died. He tilted her chin up to meet his eyes. Best thing that ever happened to me, you ruining everything. She kissed him then, soft and tentative, and he kissed back like she was something precious. When they finally pulled apart, Evelyn felt steadier. We should get ready, she said. Yeah, we should. Neither of them moved for another 10 minutes. The courthouse was even more crowded than yesterday. Word had spread about the case. The woman who told a judge she'd defy a court order. The rancher willing to lose everything to protect her. People loved drama, especially when it came wrapped in romance and legal battles. Evelyn spotted her father in the crowd and felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a hollow sort of indifference. He'd made his choices. She'd made hers. They were done. Violet appeared at her elbow. How are you holding up? Ask me in an hour. Fair. Violet squeezed her hand. Whatever happens, you were magnificent yesterday. I've never been prouder to call you my sister. The words hit harder than Evelyn expected. Thank you for testifying, for telling the truth. It was the least I could do. Should have done it years ago. Violet's voice went quiet. I'm sorry, Evelyn, for all the times I stayed silent when Mother was cruel, for choosing my own comfort over your safety. Stop. Evelyn turned to face her fully. We were both trying to survive. You did what you had to. I don't blame you. You should. Maybe, but I don't. Evelyn managed a small smile. We're both figuring out how to be better than the people who raised us. That's enough. Morrison arrived and ushered them into the courtroom. Judge Hammond was already seated, looking stern and unreadable. Evelyn's stomach churned. All rise, the bailiff called. Everyone stood. Hammond surveyed the packed courtroom with evident displeasure. I've reviewed all testimony and evidence from yesterday's hearing, she began without preamble. This is not a complicated case legally, though certain parties have tried to make it so. Her eyes cut to Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore, your argument that the debt transfer was invalid has some merit on paper. However, the spirit of territorial law regarding women's autonomy is clear. Miss Mercer is of legal age and sound mind. Her choices deserve respect. Evelyn's heart hammered. That said, the question of whether Mr. Grayson's actions were protective or predatory required careful consideration. I've concluded, based on testimony and evidence, that Mr. Grayson acted to prevent Miss Mercer from being forced into a dangerous situation with Mr. Beckman. His subsequent treatment of her, providing employment, housing with appropriate safeguards, and respecting her autonomy, supports this conclusion. Hammond paused, letting the words settle. Therefore, I rule that the debt transfer was legal under the circumstances and that Miss Mercer has been living independently by choice, not coercion. She is not required to return to her father's custody. Mr. Whitmore, your case is dismissed. The courtroom erupted. Evelyn sagged against Caleb, who caught her and held on tight. They'd won. Actually won. But Hammond wasn't finished. She banged her gavel. However, the room went quiet again. I have concerns about the precedent this case represents. Women being traded for debts, regardless of the outcome, is unconscionable. Mr. Mercer. She looked directly at Evelyn's father. You should be ashamed. You sold your daughter to settle your gambling debts. That Mr. Grayson turned out to be decent doesn't excuse your actions. I'm recommending to the territorial legislature that such debt transfers be explicitly outlawed going forward. Evelyn's father looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Hammond turned to Whitmore. And you, sir, attempted to use a vulnerable woman as a bargaining chip for financial gain. That's extortion dressed up in legal language, and I won't tolerate it in my courtroom. You're fortunate I'm not holding you in contempt. Whitmore's face went red, but he said nothing. As for you, Miss Mercer, Hammond's expression softened slightly. You showed considerable courage yesterday. I hope you use that courage to build the life you described wanting. You've earned the right to choose your own path. Don't waste it." "I won't, Your Honor. Thank you." Hammond nodded. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down with finality, and suddenly Evelyn was surrounded by people. Mrs. Chen hugging her fiercely, Jack clapping Caleb on the back, Morrison looking satisfied, Violet crying happy tears. The noise was overwhelming. Caleb pulled her out of the crowd and into a quiet corner. "You okay?" "I don't know. I think so." Evelyn laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. "We won! We actually won! We did! I can stay. I can make my own choices. I'm free." The word felt strange in her mouth. "I'm actually free." "You are." Caleb cupped her face in his hands. "So what do you choose?" "You." She said it without hesitation. "I choose you. I choose the ranch. I choose the life we're building together." "You sure? You could go anywhere now. Do anything. You don't have to." She kissed him, hard and certain, cutting off his words. When they finally broke apart, people were staring, and Evelyn didn't care. "I'm sure," she said firmly. "I'm choosing you, Caleb Grayson. Get used to it." His smile was blinding. "Yes, ma'am." They left Guthrie that afternoon amid a flurry of congratulations and well-wishes. Violet promised to visit soon, actually meaning it this time. Morrison gave Evelyn his card and told her to call if she ever needed anything. Even a few strangers stopped them on the street to say they'd been rooting for her. The ride back to the ranch was quiet and peaceful. The Oklahoma sky stretched endless and blue above them, and Evelyn felt something inside her chest unfurl for the first time in her life. Hope, maybe. Or just the absence of constant fear. "What are you thinking?" Caleb asked. "That I can't believe this is real, that I keep waiting for something to go wrong." "Nothing's going wrong." "You don't know that." "No, but I'm choosing to believe it anyway." He glanced at her. "You should try it sometime." Evelyn laughed. "Choosing to believe things work out? That's not very practical." "Hasn't stopped me yet." They reached the ranch as the sun was setting, painting everything gold and amber. Mrs. Chen had the whole place lit up in welcome, and when they dismounted, she pulled Evelyn into another crushing hug. "Knew that judge would see sense," she said gruffly. "Now come eat. Made your favorite." Dinner was loud and celebratory. The ranch hands joined them, and everyone talked over each other, sharing their version of events. Evelyn sat at the table, surrounded by people who'd become family without her noticing, and felt something settle in her chest. Belonging. This was what belonging felt like. Later, after everyone had gone to bed, Evelyn found Caleb on the back porch looking out over the valley. "Can't sleep?" she asked, sitting beside him. "Too much to think about." "Like what?" He was quiet for a moment. "I've been working on something, waiting for the right time to bring it up." "What kind of something?" Caleb pulled a folded paper from his pocket and handed it to her. "Open it." Evelyn unfolded the document carefully. It was a deed, for half the ranch, made out in her name. Her hands started shaking. "What is this?" "Exactly what it looks like. Half ownership of the ranch, legal and binding." Caleb's voice was steady. "I had Morrison draw it up weeks ago. Was waiting until the case was over to give it to you." "Caleb, I can't accept this. This is your ranch. Everything you built is ours now, if you want it." He turned to face her. "I meant what I said about choosing you, about building a life together. This makes it official, not because of debt or obligation or legal maneuvering, because I want you to have something that's truly yours, something no one can ever take away." Evelyn stared at the deed through blurring eyes. "This is insane." "Probably. You barely know me. I know enough." He smiled slightly. "I know you're brave and stubborn, and you'd rather fight than run. I know you shot a man to protect this place. I know you stood up in court and told a judge you'd defy her before you'd let anyone control you again." His voice went soft. "I know I love you, and I know I want to spend the rest of my life proving you can trust that. You're really giving me half your ranch. I'm really giving you half our ranch, if you'll take it." Evelyn looked at the paper in her hands, at this man who kept finding new ways to show her she mattered, and felt the last wall around her heart finally crumble. "On one condition," she said. "Name it." "Marry me." Caleb blinked. What? You heard me. Evelyn set the deed aside and took his hands. I know Morrison suggested marriage as a legal strategy, and you refused to ask because you didn't want me to feel pressured. Well, I'm not pressured anymore. I'm free. I can choose whatever I want, and I choose this. I choose you. I choose us. She took a shaky breath. So I'm asking you, Caleb Grayson, will you marry me? For a moment he just stared at her. Then he laughed, the sound full of joy and disbelief. You're serious. Completely. You want to marry me? I do. Which is fortunate, since that's generally part of the ceremony. Evelyn squeezed his hands. Look, I know I'm difficult and damaged, and I'll probably spend years learning how to accept that you actually love me. But I'm willing to do the work, and I'm willing to bet on us. So what do you say? Caleb pulled her into his lap and kissed her thoroughly. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. Yes, he said simply. Yes to everything. Yes to marriage and partnership and spending the rest of my life watching you figure out how strong you are. Yes to all of it. Evelyn's eyes burned. Yeah? Yeah? He kissed her again, softer this time. When? Soon, before I lose my nerve. You won't lose your nerve, but soon works for me. They sat on the porch holding each other while the stars came out, making plans for a life they'd build together. Nothing about it was perfect. Evelyn still woke up some nights expecting to find herself back in her father's house. Caleb still carried guilt about his first wife. They both had scars that would take years to heal. But they had time. And they had each other. And somehow, that was enough. The wedding happened 3 weeks later in the ranch's parlor with everyone who mattered in attendance. Mrs. Chen cried through the whole ceremony. Jack gave Evelyn away since her father was still in jail, and she wouldn't have asked him anyway. Violet served as her only attendant and didn't make a single comment about Evelyn's simple dress or the wildflowers they'd picked that morning. Morrison officiated, having gotten ordained specifically for the occasion. The vows were traditional, and when Evelyn said, "I do," she meant it with every fiber of her being. Caleb kissed her like he'd been waiting his whole life for permission, and the small gathering erupted in cheers. At the reception, Violet pulled Evelyn aside. "You look happy," she said. "I am. It's terrifying." "Good terrifying or bad terrifying?" "Good, I think." "Ask me again in a year." Evelyn smiled. "What about you? What are you going to do now?" "I'm leaving, going east to stay with Mother's family, maybe find work, maybe go to school. Figure out who I am when I'm not trying to manage Papa's disasters." Violet's eyes were bright. "You inspired me. Watching you fight for your freedom made me realize I need to fight for mine too." "You'll write?" "Every month, and you better write back." "I will." Evelyn hugged her tightly. "Thank you for everything. For testifying, for warning me about Whitmore, for being brave enough to tell the truth. Thank you for showing me what bravery looks like." Violet pulled back. "Take care of yourself. And take care of that rancher of yours. He's one of the good ones." "I know." Violet left the next morning, and Evelyn watched her wagon disappear down the road with mixed feelings. They'd never been close, but they'd found something like sisterhood in the end. That counted for something. The weeks after the wedding settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Evelyn learned the ranch business properly. The accounts, the contracts, the careful balance of expenses and profits. Caleb taught her to manage cattle sales and negotiate with buyers who thought a woman had no business in ranching. She proved them wrong repeatedly. Mrs. Chen showed her how to preserve food for winter, how to manage a household of ranch hands, how to treat injuries and illnesses with what they had on hand. The older woman never said it outright, but Evelyn understood she was being groomed to take over eventually. The responsibility should have terrified her. Instead, it felt right. She still had bad days. Days when she woke up convinced it was all temporary. Days when she caught herself making herself smaller, quieter, less trouble. Days when the old fears came creeping back. But Caleb was patient. He'd find her on those days and just exist alongside her, not pushing, not demanding she be okay, just being present until she found her footing again. "You don't have to be perfect," he told her once after a particularly bad day. "You just have to be here." "What if I can't be what you need?" "You already are." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." He pulled her close. You're exactly what I need, damaged parts and all. Because your damaged parts understand my damaged parts. We're a matched set. It was absurd and true and exactly what she needed to hear. 6 months after the wedding, Evelyn realized she'd stopped checking to make sure her bedroom door was locked. She'd stopped flinching when Caleb touched her unexpectedly. She'd stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. She'd started to believe this was real, that she deserved it, that love didn't always come with conditions and cruelty. One evening, she found Caleb in his office, staring at maps and frowning. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing's wrong, just thinking." He gestured at the maps. "We could expand. Buy the Patterson place to the east. It'd nearly double our grazing land." "Do we need to expand?" "Need? No. But we could. Build something bigger. Leave something behind that matters." Evelyn studied the maps, then looked at her husband. "For who?" "What do you mean? Who are we leaving it for?" She moved closer. "It's just us, Caleb. Unless—" She stopped, the thought occurring to her for the first time. "Unless you want it to be more than just us." His eyes widened. "You mean— I mean maybe someday. If you want, we could—" She couldn't quite finish the sentence. Caleb stood and crossed to her, taking her hands. "Do you want that?" "I don't know. I never thought I'd have the option. Never thought I'd be in a situation where bringing a child into the world felt like anything other than a disaster." She met his eyes. "But now, maybe. Someday. If we're both ready." "Someday sounds good." He kissed her forehead. "No rush. We've got time." They did have time. Years of it, stretching out ahead of them. The thought should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt like possibility. A year after the wedding, Evelyn stood on the rise overlooking the valley and watched the sun set over land that was half hers. The ranch had grown. They'd bought the Patterson place and hired more hands. The cattle herd was thriving. They'd survived a drought, a harsh winter, and 3 separate attempts by neighboring ranchers to buy them out. They'd built something real, something that would last. Caleb rode up beside her, his horse snorting in the cool evening air. "Thought I'd find you here," he said. "It's my favorite spot." "Mine too." He dismounted and stood beside her, both of them looking out over their land. "You ever regret it? Choosing this life?" Evelyn considered the question seriously. A year ago, she would have said it was too early to know. Now she knew the answer with certainty. "No, not for a second." She turned to look at him. "You? Regret the best thing that ever happened to me?" "Not likely." He smiled. "Though I do regret not finding you sooner. 7 years is a long time to wait." "You found me when I needed finding. That's what matters." They stood there as the sky turned from gold to purple to deep blue, and Evelyn thought about the girl she'd been a year ago, scared, convinced she was worthless, believing love was just another word for ownership. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her own worth, who'd fought for her freedom and won, who'd chosen love not because she had to, but because she wanted to. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For remembering me, for paying that debt, for giving me a choice when no one else would." She took his hand. "For loving me before I knew how to love myself." Caleb squeezed her hand. "You would have figured it out eventually. You're too stubborn not to." "Maybe, but it would have taken a lot longer without you." They rode back to the house as full dark settled over the valley. Lights glowed in the windows, and Evelyn could see Mrs. Chen moving around the kitchen preparing dinner. Their home, their life, built on honesty and respect and the radical idea that people deserve to choose their own futures. That night, lying in bed beside her husband, Evelyn thought about the book that had started everything. The story of a girl who ran west and found freedom. She'd read it 100 times, always thinking the ending was incomplete, always feeling like the author had left something out. Now she understood. The author hadn't left anything out. Freedom was the ending. Freedom was enough. But love, real love, chosen love, love that made you braver instead of smaller, that was the epilogue. The part that came after you'd already saved yourself. The part where you got to decide what to do with the life you'd fought so hard to claim. Evelyn had chosen to share hers, and every single day that choice felt more right. Years later, when people asked her how she'd ended up owning one of the most successful ranches in Oklahoma Territory, Evelyn would tell them the truth. She'd been sold to pay a debt. She'd been given to a stranger who turned out to be decent. She'd fought for her freedom in a courtroom and won. But the real story, the one she kept closer to her heart, was simpler. She'd been chosen. Not for what she could provide or how little trouble she'd cause, but for who she was. Scars and stubbornness and all. And then, when given the chance, she'd done the choosing herself. She'd chosen dignity over survival, honesty over safety, love over fear, and in the end, that made all the difference. The girl in the book had found freedom by running west. Evelyn found hers by standing still, by refusing to be moved, by claiming the space she occupied and defending it with everything she had. Both endings were honest. Both were true. But Evelyn's had one thing the books didn't. Standing beside her through all of it was a quiet, stubborn man who'd loved her long before she knew how to love herself. Who'd waited 7 years for a 10-minute conversation to turn into something real. Who'd gambled everything on the radical idea that she deserved better. And every morning, when Evelyn woke up in the house they'd built together, on the land they owned together, living the life they'd fought for together, she knew exactly how lucky she was. Not because someone had saved her, but because she'd saved herself. And then, only then, she'd chosen to share that hard-won freedom with someone who understood what it cost. That was the real ending, the honest one. The one where the girl didn't need saving but accepted love anyway. Where freedom and partnership weren't opposites, but two sides of the same valuable coin. Evelyn Grayson, no longer Mercer, thank heaven, had started life as a debt payment, but she'd ended up as exactly what she'd always deserved to be. Free, loved, and finally, completely home.